Sometimes the sweetest victories come after years of being underestimated. I'm Michael Zhang, and this is the story of how I went from being the useless son to the majority owner of our family's $100 million business empire. Our family business, Zhang Enterprises, wasn't always an empire. My father started with a single electronics store in 1985, shortly after immigrating from China. Through relentless work and strategic expansion, he built it into a chain of high-end electronics stores across 3 states. By the time I was born, we were comfortable. By the time I finished high school, we were wealthy. My older brother, Richard, was always the golden child. He had our father's aggressive business instincts and our mother's charm, while I was quiet and analytical, spending hours studying market trends and business models. Richard was out making deals and commanding attention. "Your brother understands business," Dad would say. "He has the Zhang spirit. You're too soft." What they didn't realize was that I saw business differently. While Richard focused on flashy deals and rapid expansion, I noticed the inefficiencies in our operations, the opportunities being missed, the risks being ignored. I tried telling Dad about my concerns when I was 19. "Our inventory management system is outdated," I explained, showing him the analysis I'd done. "We're losing millions in potential profits." He barely glanced at my carefully prepared report. "Leave the business to those who understand it," he dismissed. "Focus on your studies." So I did. I earned degrees in business administration and computer science, graduating summa cum laude while working part-time in our smallest store. Richard, meanwhile, was already a vice president, making splashy acquisitions that got his picture in the business papers. After graduation, I asked to join the company's management team. Richard laughed during the family dinner where I made my request. "You, in management? You can barely talk to customers." Mom tried to be diplomatic. "Perhaps you could start in HR? Something quieter?" "The tech department needs a new junior analyst," Dad suggested. "That might suit your abilities." I accepted the position, but I had a plan. While Richard was making headlines with aggressive expansions, I was quietly learning every aspect of our business. I documented the inefficiencies, the waste, the outdated systems that were costing us millions. More importantly, I started buying shares. Every bonus, every bit of my salary I could spare went into purchasing company stock. Most was available on the open market. Dad had taken the company public years ago, though our family retained majority control, or so they thought. Richard's expansion plans were causing problems. His acquisitions were flashy but overpriced. Our debt was mounting, and our core business was suffering from neglect. During board meetings, I tried raising concerns. Richard always shut me down. "Leave the real business to real businessmen," he'd say. "Go back to your computers." Then came the crisis. One of Richard's biggest acquisitions turned out to be a disaster. The company he'd bought for $50 million was worth barely half that. Our stock price plummeted. Dad called an emergency shareholders meeting. The boardroom was packed with investors, board members, and family. Richard stood at the podium, trying to defend his decisions. I sat quietly, reviewing the documents in my briefcase one last time. 10 years of careful planning was about to pay off. "We need to vote on new leadership," one board member suggested. "These mistakes have cost us dearly." Richard's face turned red. "Mistakes? I built this company." "Well, Dad and I did." He shot me a contemptuous look. "While some people hide behind computers, real leaders take risks." Dad nodded in agreement. "My son has made this company what it is." "Which son?" I asked quietly. The room went silent. I never spoke up in these meetings. Richard sneered. "The son who matters. The one who's dedicated his life to this company, not playing with spreadsheets in the IT department." I stood up slowly. "Let's talk about dedication." "You're a disgrace," Richard yelled. "You've never contributed anything to this company. You're just jealous of my success." I opened my briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. "Actually, let's review some numbers." "We don't have time for your technical nonsense," Richard dismissed. "Make time," I said, my voice carrying an authority that made several board members sit up straighter. "Because according to these documents, I own 51% of Zhang Enterprises." The boardroom erupted in chaos. Richard lunged for my documents. Dad stood up so fast his chair fell backward. "Impossible," Richard shouted. "The family controls the majority shares." "The family does," I agreed calmly, "just not the family members you thought." I started distributing copies of my ownership documentation. Over the past 10 years, I've been quietly purchasing shares. When Richard's mismanagement caused the stock price to drop, I bought even more. As of last week's market close, I own 51% of all outstanding shares. Dad's face had gone pale. Michael, why didn't you tell us? Would you have listened? I asked simply. When have you ever listened to me? The board members were reviewing my documents with growing excitement. Our company's largest institutional investor, Mrs. Chen, smiled knowingly. She'd known about my purchases. In fact, she'd helped facilitate many of them. This is a trick, Richard blustered. Some IT department scheme. It's all legal and verified. Mrs. Chen interrupted. I've been watching Mr. Zhang's strategic acquisitions of company stock for years. Quite impressive. But, Richard stammered. Let me make this simple, I said, standing at the podium Richard had vacated. As majority shareholder, I'm calling for an immediate vote on company leadership. The next hour was a blur of procedural motions and votes. When the dust settled, I was CEO of Zhang Enterprises. Richard was removed from all operational roles, though I allowed him to keep his board seat. Family is still family, after all. Dad sat in stunned silence throughout the proceedings. Mom dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief, though whether from shame or pride, I couldn't tell. As the boardroom emptied, Richard finally found his voice again. You can't do this. You don't know how to run a company. I pulled out another folder. Actually, I do. This is my plan for the next 5 years. While you were making headlines with overpriced acquisitions, I was developing strategies to modernize our operations, optimize our supply chain, and expand into e-commerce. E-commerce? Dad scoffed. Our customers want personal service. Our customers want convenience and competitive prices. I corrected. Something our competitors are already offering. We're losing market share every quarter because we've failed to adapt. I projected my analysis onto the boardroom screen. These are the efficiency improvements I implemented just in my department. They saved us $3 million last year alone. Imagine what we can do company-wide. The remaining board members leaned forward, suddenly very interested in the quiet son's ideas. Furthermore, I continued, I've developed partnerships with key technology providers. We can modernize our entire operation within 18 months. Mrs. Chen nodded approvingly. This is exactly the kind of strategic thinking we've been hoping to see. Richard slumped in his chair, defeated. Dad stared at my presentation, seeing for the first time what he'd been dismissing all these years. The next few months were challenging. Change is never easy, especially in a family business. Some longtime employees resigned rather than adapt to new systems. Richard tried to undermine my authority several times before finally accepting reality. But the results spoke for themselves. Within 6 months, our e-commerce platform was generating 30% of total revenue. Our modernized inventory system cut waste by 40%. The stock price recovered and then soared to new highs. Dad started attending my strategy meetings, quietly taking notes. One evening, he stayed behind after everyone else had left. I was wrong, he said simply, about everything. I waited, letting him find his words. I thought business was about big moves, aggressive deals, like Richard, like I used to be. He smiled sadly. But you saw the future while we were stuck in the past. The future is about working smarter, not just harder, I replied, something I tried to tell you 10 years ago. He winced at the reminder. Your mother and I, we owe you an apology, many apologies. You don't owe me anything, I said, everything I am, even my approach to business, I learned from you. You taught me persistence, attention to detail, the importance of understanding every aspect of an operation. You just didn't realize you were teaching those lessons. Tears formed in his eyes, something I'd never seen before. You're a better businessman than I ever was. Different, I corrected, not better. You built something amazing from nothing. I'm just helping it evolve. Richard took longer to come around. The day after the shareholder meeting, he cleared out his office, dramatically announcing he would start his own company to compete with us. 3 years later, his venture was failing. He'd made the same mistakes, flashy deals, poor operational control, resistance to technology. When he finally swallowed his pride and came to my office, I was ready. Come to gloat? He asked bitterly. No, I replied, pushing a folder across my desk. Come to offer you a job. He opened the folder suspiciously. Inside was a proposal for a new division of Zhang Enterprises, one that would focus on the high-touch, relationship-based business model he excelled at. I don't understand, he said, after everything. You're still my brother, I said simply, and you have skills this company needs. Your personal approach to business, your ability to build relationships, those are valuable. They just need to be properly focused and supported by modern systems. You're offering me a chance to come back? Just like that? Not just like that. You'll report to the board, not directly to me. Your budget will be strictly controlled, and you'll need to complete our new management training program, including the technology components. He stared at the proposal for a long time. Why? Because despite everything, your family, and because I believe people can change when they're shown a better way. He signed the contract that day. It wasn't always smooth, old habits die hard, but over time, Richard learned to combine his relationship-building skills with modern business practices. The division he runs is now one of our most profitable. Mom took longer to adjust to the new reality. She'd always seen me as her quiet, bookish son who needed protection. Watching me run a $100 million company challenged everything she'd believed about me. I worry about you, she said one Sunday during our weekly family dinner. All this responsibility. Mom, I interrupted gently. I've been handling responsibility since I was 19. You just didn't see it. She looked at me then, really looked at me, perhaps for the first time. No, she said softly, we didn't see a lot of things. The company continues to grow. Our e-commerce platform now serves customers nationwide. We're expanding into artificial intelligence and predictive analytics, things Richard still doesn't fully understand but has learned to trust. Dad semi-retired last year, though he still comes to board meetings. He sits quietly, watching me run the company he built, finally recognizing that his soft son had a strength all his own. Last month, we had another shareholders meeting. I presented our latest results, record profits, expanding market share, strong growth in all divisions. Richard sat in the front row, nodding along with my technology initiatives instead of dismissing them. Afterward, Mrs. Chen pulled me aside. I knew, you know, she said with a smile, all those years ago, when you started buying shares, I knew you saw something others didn't. What was that? I asked. The future, she replied simply, and the patience to wait for it. Yesterday, I found an old photo while cleaning out some files. It showed teenage me trying to explain a computer system to Dad while Richard posed for newspapers in the background. I had it framed and hung it in my office, next to our latest technology awards. The caption reads, "Success isn't always loud." Richard saw it during our last meeting. He stood looking at it for a long time before speaking. You know what's ironic? He said finally, all those years, we thought you were the one who didn't understand business. Turns out we were the ones who didn't understand where business was going. I smiled. The good news is, there's always time to learn. This morning, I called a special board meeting. On the agenda, discussing our 5-year plan for expansion into artificial intelligence and robotics. Richard will present the customer relations component. Dad will share insights from his decades of experience. And I'll lead the technology strategy, not as the quiet son who wasn't good enough, but as the CEO who saw the future and had the patience to wait for everyone else to see it too. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about proving others wrong, it's about proving yourself right, even if it takes 10 years and 51% of the company to do it.
My name is Kathleen. I'm 31 years old, and I am a hardworking woman focused on my career. I live with my husband, Patrick, in a house we share. Recently, I've been thinking a lot about starting a family. However, Patrick has different ideas. He thinks we should first save enough money to build our own house and settle down before having children. Because of this, we are both working hard to save for our future home. Even though I want to have children soon, Patrick stands firm on his decision. Whenever I bring up the idea of starting a family, he reminds me of the importance of getting a house first. It's upsetting that he doesn't seem to understand how I feel. To help us reach our goal faster, I've decided to work even harder to contribute to our savings. Patrick and I have been married for a year now, and I've noticed something about our relationship. He doesn't often take my opinions seriously. This was true even when we were dating. Back then, I admired how strong-willed he was, but now, I realize that marriage is about both people respecting each other's views. I'm starting to worry about our relationship. Things feel even harder because his parents are so involved in our lives. Patrick's parents live nearby, and he visits them often. He says these visits help us save money. However, I found out that he sometimes goes out for drinks with his coworkers, but he doesn't count those costs in his savings plan. It feels unfair that he is so strict about saving when it comes to me, but is more relaxed about his own spending. He even tells me to use less hot water and turn off lights quickly, but he doesn't follow these rules himself. If he treated us equally, maybe our relationship wouldn't feel so unbalanced. Every week, we visit Patrick's parents, and it feels like there's always a new issue. They often ask when we are planning to have a baby. "It's been a year since you got married," they say. "When will we get to see our grandchilds?" Their constant comments put a lot of pressure on me. Meanwhile, Patrick just sits beside me quietly and doesn't say much to support me. This situation is very frustrating. I feel like I'm carrying the weight of these expectations by myself. Patrick's focus on saving and his parents' pressure to start a family make me feel stuck. Marriage should be about partnership, where both people listen to and support each other. I hope that Patrick and I can learn to work together better, not just on saving money, but also on making decisions that matter to both of us. I want our marriage to feel like a true partnership, where we both feel heard and valued. I can see it in Patrick's face. He's glaring at me disapprovingly. It's clear he wants to tell me, "Don't say unnecessary things." Like him, I want a child too, but he insists that we must first build our own house. What frustrates me even more is how his parents keep pressuring me about having a child. Instead of advising Patrick, who refuses to listen to me when I bring up the topic, they turn all their focus on me. During every visit to their home, I feel overwhelmed by their constant remarks. Even though I want to speak up, I'm silenced by their relentless pressure to have a grandchild. It's inappropriate for them to keep badgering me about this, especially when Patrick is the one unwilling to take the next step. After the meal that evening, Patrick casually announced, "I'm going out for a smoke." That's when one of my in-laws said something that stung deeply. "Kathleen, it seems like you're always working. If you want to be a proper housewife, you should quit your job and focus on being a good wife. Maybe that's why Patrick isn't paying attention to you." Their words felt like a slap. It sounded as though they were blaming me for not having children, simply because I have a career. I couldn't hold back any longer. "It's Patrick who asked me to work in the first place," I retorted. "If you're so concerned about this, why don't you talk to your son first instead of lecturing me all the time?" My voice rose with anger. I want children too, but Patrick refuses to even consider it until we have a house. If you want someone to convince, start with him. Stop putting all the blame on me. My words left them stunned. There was silence around the table as I stood up, muttered an apology, and walked out. By the time I reached the entrance, my anger had shifted toward Patrick. There he was, casually smoking by the door, as though nothing had happened. I climbed into the car without saying much, but Patrick followed me and asked, "Hey, are we leaving already?" He sounded completely unbothered by what had just happened. Knowing he would never be honest with his parents about the situation, I felt fed up with all the stress they were piling on me. As the car started, I told Patrick firmly, "I'm not visiting your parents' house anymore." He looked shocked and asked, "Why not?" "We save on food expenses by eating there. Plus, you want a house and kids too, don't you?" That was it for me. I couldn't take the constant demands anymore, from his parents or from him. Both of them seemed more interested in blaming me than working together to solve the real problems. It was clear things needed to change, and I wasn't going to keep quiet any longer. I snapped and said, "If saving money is so important, why don't you cut back on things like your drinking parties or smoking? Instead of driving all the way to your parents' house just to save on one meal, why not focus on saving money in ways that actually make a difference?" My frustration boiled over as I continued. "Everyone needs a break sometimes, but you keep putting all these rules on me, like not using hot water or making sure the lights are off by 9 p.m. Do you think we can save money without you sacrificing anything? If I have to do all of this alone, then I don't even want the house. I'm tired of this." Patrick brushed it off, saying, "It's not a big deal." But I shot back, "No, it is a big deal. How much patience do you think I have? I've put up with this for so long." I was also angry about how he acted in front of his parents, pretending that I was the reason we weren't having children. "I'm tired of always being blamed for not giving them grandchildren," I said. "It's not me who doesn't want kids, it's you. I've been saying for ages that I want children soon. So stop being so stubborn." Seeing Patrick struggle to handle my unusual burst of anger gave me a small sense of relief, but it didn't fix everything. I turned away and stared out of the car window, ignoring him. I felt exhausted, unsure of what to do next. 2 months later, something happened that shifted things between us. My father's brother, my uncle, passed away. He had been wealthy, owning several pieces of land, a grand mansion, and living a luxurious lifestyle. His passing seemed to catch Patrick's attention. "Wow, I didn't know you had such an impressive relative," he said, clearly surprised. A few days after my uncle's death, I received news about his inheritance. I decided to discuss the details with the lawyer at our apartment. The inheritance was solely related to me, so I knew it wasn't something that involved Patrick. When the lawyer arrived, I politely asked Patrick to leave the room. He looked uncomfortable with the topic of inheritance anyway, and it was a personal matter that didn't concern him. The entire experience made me reflect on our relationship. Patrick's behavior, from his frugality to his unwillingness to compromise, had worn me down. Yet here he was, suddenly intrigued by my uncle's wealth, even though he had been so dismissive about everything else. It was frustrating and disappointing. The inheritance meeting felt like a moment where I could focus on something for myself, without his interference or criticism. It made me realize I needed to stand up for myself more often and not let Patrick's controlling ways dominate every aspect of my life. I wanted to keep Patrick out of any trouble that might come up if he got involved in the inheritance discussion. After about 6 hours of listening to the lawyer explain all the details, I thanked him for his time and said goodbye. When I finished, I noticed Patrick, who had been at home earlier, was nowhere to be found. I figured he had stepped out to avoid interrupting the meeting, so I started preparing dinner, not thinking much of it. 5 months later, Patrick came up to me and said, "There's something I want to show you." Without giving much explanation, he took me for a drive. I felt a mix of excitement and curiosity as we entered a residential area. But my confusion grew when we parked in front of a house I didn't recognize. Patrick pressed the doorbell, and to my surprise, his parents came out to greet us. This isn't their house, I thought, feeling uneasy. My father-in-law welcomed us, saying, "You finally made it. When are you moving in? Kathleen, you should get ready to live here with us by the end of the month." His words caught me completely off guard. He then went on to accuse me of being a selfish daughter-in-law and said I was the one always blaming Patrick for the delay in having children. I shot a sharp look at Patrick, stunned and upset. Why would he bring me here after I had made it clear I didn't want to visit his parents anymore? Trying to make sense of what was happening, I asked Patrick why he had done this. He shrugged casually and said, "Don't get so angry. If we live together, it will help you and my mom get closer. Besides, this will be our new home, so you should try to work with them on the children issue too." "Live together?" I repeated, feeling disbelief. I had never agreed to live with his parents, especially after all the stress and pressure they had put on me. I reminded him that I had specifically said I wouldn't visit their house anymore. Patrick then explained, "It's a one-family house. My plan was always for us to live with my parents eventually. So, what's the problem with living in a one-family house now?" His words left me speechless. The idea of living with his parents, after everything I had endured, was not something I could accept. To make matters worse, Patrick had made this decision without even talking to me about it first. The air felt heavy as his question hung there, unanswered. This moment made it clear to me that Patrick and I weren't on the same page about what we wanted for our future. The frustration and betrayal I felt were overwhelming, and I knew this wasn't something I could ignore. I thought a lot about the situation. Living in a one-family house was a big decision, especially when considering our financial state. From what I knew, building such a beautiful new house didn't seem possible with our savings. I couldn't understand how Patrick had managed it. "My dad and I chipped in money," Patrick explained casually. "Our savings are empty now, but it's fine, right?" His laid-back attitude left me confused. Then he added, "I heard your uncle's inheritance is worth $920,000. So, if you use that money to pay us back for the cost of the house, it should work out." I was shocked. He really thought my inheritance should automatically go toward the house, without even asking me first. Even if I did receive the inheritance, how to use it should be my decision, not his. The fact that he assumed otherwise upset me deeply. When I rejected the idea, Patrick became visibly frustrated. He reached into his bag and pulled out a pre-filled divorce form with his name already on it. "Your inheritance is our money. If you don't want to live with my parents, then let's just get a divorce," he said coldly. I took the divorce form from his hand, feeling a strange sense of relief. "Fine," I replied firmly. "If living together with your parents is the only other option, then divorce is the better choice." I placed the form into my bag, turned my back to him and his stunned parents, and continued, "By the way, I renounced my uncle's inheritance." Patrick froze, his face full of confusion. I didn't wait for him to respond. I left, took a bus back to our apartment, and decided to take control of my life. Once home, I completed the divorce form by signing my name next to Patrick's. I didn't hesitate. I submitted the papers right away. Knowing I couldn't stay in that apartment anymore, I went to a home improvement store and bought some cardboard boxes to start packing. Realizing I couldn't handle the move alone, I hired a moving company. Luckily, it was a slow season for moving, so they could help me relocate quickly. As I packed, I felt a mix of emotions: relief, sadness, and determination. It wasn't an easy decision to end my marriage, but I knew it was the right one. Living in a situation where my voice was ignored and my boundaries were crossed wasn't something I could accept anymore. By taking these steps, I was finally prioritizing my own happiness and peace of mind. It wasn't just about moving out of the apartment. It was about moving forward in life on my terms. Though the road ahead seemed uncertain, I felt ready to face it with strength and confidence. As I packed my belongings for the move, I heard a commotion outside the front door. It was Patrick, trying to come in. I had the chain lock on and called out to him. "Sorry, the chain lock is on. I don't know what you might do when you're angry. Besides, I need to finish packing. Could you stay at your parents' house for a few days?" Patrick's voice was firm as he responded, "I won't accept a divorce." His statement caught me off guard. I paused and said, "But you handed me the divorce form yourself, didn't you? If you signed it, that means you agreed to the divorce. Do you understand what you've done?" He looked frustrated but didn't say much, his frown deepening. Then he quickly changed the topic. "Why would you give up on a $920,000 inheritance? Normally, you'd inherit it," he questioned. It seemed he had overheard bits of the story about the inheritance but didn't know the full details. Likely, after hearing about the amount, he rushed to my in-laws and they impulsively decided to buy the one-family house, assuming the money would cover it. They hadn't stopped to think about the consequences. I took a deep breath and explained, "The inheritance came to me because there wasn't anyone else to claim it. My uncle had 2 sons, 4 daughters, a wife, and grandchildren. However, all of them renounced the inheritance, so it ended up coming to me. Yes, my uncle had $920,000, but he also had to demolish his mansion, spend a lot on maintaining his land, and pay off significant debts. After understanding everything, I realized it was better to renounce the inheritance than to take it and deal with all the problems that came with it." Patrick stared at me in disbelief. "No way. So even if you had inherited $920,000, you're saying there wouldn't have been much left? That's fraud." I shook my head. "It's not fraud. The lawyer and I discussed everything properly. The truth is, someone overheard part of the discussion but didn't stay long enough to hear the whole story. They misunderstood and spread false information. That's how all this confusion started." My explanation left Patrick speechless. For the first time, he seemed to realize the mistake he had made. He had jumped to conclusions, made plans without consulting me, and had involved his parents in decisions based on incomplete information. As I continued packing, I could sense that Patrick was finally reflecting on his actions. Whether or not he fully understood the consequences, I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let myself be dragged into a life where my voice and choices didn't matter. For me, this was the beginning of a new chapter, one where I would take control of my own life, free from the pressures of Patrick and his family. "It's too late now," I said firmly. "You betrayed my trust. We've already filed for divorce, and we are no longer a couple. Why are you suddenly saying you don't want a divorce now? If you truly didn't want this, you should have followed me right away when I returned. Shouldn't you?" I reminded him that his actions had consequences and no amount of regret could change what had already happened. I added, "Your mother's opinion about the divorce doesn't change the fact that you and your father invested in the one-family house without considering my feelings or even discussing it with me. Your mother doesn't understand the value of money because she hasn't worked or handled finances the way I have. But that's not my problem anymore." I sighed, realizing that I wasn't responsible for listening to his complaints about his family anymore. If we were still married, maybe I would have cared, but we're not a couple now. Besides, have you even submitted the divorce papers yet? Patrick looked desperate and pleaded, "If you don't file them, we can still fix this. Please, let's live together in the one-family house. We can make it work." I shook my head. "I've already submitted the divorce papers. There's no going back now." His face fell, and he stood outside the apartment door, looking lost and defeated. While I believed he brought this on himself, I didn't want to leave him lingering outside forever. Still, I had no time to waste, so I focused on my preparations for the move. After a while, he left, and I continued with my plans. Later, I informed my workplace about the divorce, especially since my boss had previously acted as a mediator between Patrick and me. I felt obligated to apologize for how things turned out. During lunch, I also told my coworkers, many of whom had attended our wedding, about the situation. To my surprise, Patrick stormed into my department that day. In front of everyone, he exclaimed, "It's absurd that you're openly talking about the divorce. I wish you hadn't mentioned it." He explained that word had spread in his department, where people mistakenly believed I had inherited an estate and refused to use it for the house. He claimed that he was judged unfairly and avoided by his colleagues because of our divorce. The awkwardness of the situation earned me sympathy from my coworkers. Over time, Patrick found it unbearable and eventually quit his job. During this difficult period, something unexpected happened. A male colleague approached me and confessed, "I've actually liked you for a long time. I admire your strength, and I'd love to build a life with you, a home where we can communicate and work through things as true partners." His words touched me deeply. For the first time in a long while, I felt hopeful about what the future might hold. I realized that moving on wasn't just about leaving behind the past. It was about creating a better, happier life for myself, one where I could truly be understood and respected. The sound of Paul's voice cut through the noise of clinking dishes, sharp and demanding. "Janet, bring me some tea."
"Now?"
I froze, my hands still in the soapy water. "Hold on," I said quietly, trying to keep my tone steady. "I'm doing the dishes." His voice dripped with disbelief and impatience. "Stop that, and bring me the tea."
"Now."
"Can't you follow simple orders?" I opened my mouth, trying to respond, but before I could say anything, he interrupted. "What a useless wife you are." Just then, I heard another voice from the living room. "Make me some sweet coffee," my mother-in-law, Mrs. Lauren, called out. She was sitting on the couch, eating a slice of cake she had taken from the fridge. Her eyes held a sharp, unkind look that made me feel small. I sighed and looked at the pile of dirty dishes in the sink. There were so many. I felt tired, worn down, but still, I nodded and turned to get the tea and coffee. "Leave the dishes for later," Mrs. Lauren sneered. "Just do what we tell you." Useless wife. Paul's words echoed through the kitchen, each one feeling like a whip. "My name is Janet, and I'm 31 years old. I'm a working mother, and yet, I feel like I am trapped. This house is supposed to be my home, but it feels more like a cage. I got married when I was 25, hoping for love, kindness, and companionship. Instead, I ended up with Paul and his demanding mother. My only happiness comes from our little boy, who is 5 years old. He is my light in this dark, joyless place. We live in Paul's parents' house. It wasn't my choice. I was told we needed to be here to look after Mrs. Lauren after her husband passed away. At first, I felt sorry for her. I believed she was mourning, that she needed family around. But soon, I realized she had no real grief. She only wanted someone to control, to order around. She wanted someone to treat as a servant, and that someone was me. Every day is the same. I cook, clean, work, and try to keep up with their endless demands, but it's never enough. If I make a meal, they criticize it. "The stir-fry is so poorly made," Mrs. Lauren would say with disgust. "Make it from scratch, like you're supposed to." I would try to respond politely. "I'm busy, so I can only make simple things." She would snap back with a cold tone. I hate backtalk from my daughter-in-law. Cook it from scratch. One day, I finally dared to ask her, "Why don't you cook if you're such a good cook?" Her response was cold and dismissive. "Why should I do housework when you're here?" she sneered, making it clear that she considered me her personal servant. Over the years, their cruelty has only grown worse. When they weren't scolding me, they ignored me completely. It was like I was invisible, a ghost in my own life. 6 years have passed in this suffocating atmosphere. Now I am 31 and Paul is 35. Our son is growing, but the air in this house remains heavy and oppressive. Mrs. Lauren is now 66, and she seems to take pleasure in watching me struggle. One evening, after a long day of work, I walked home, exhausted and weighed down by a painful realization. In this house, to these people, my existence seemed meaningless. I felt like a shadow in my own home, unseen and unheard. The only person who truly noticed me was my son, and the thought of losing even his small recognition was too painful to bear. When I came home that evening, I tried to push away the sadness by focusing on dinner. I got busy in the kitchen, making mapo tofu, fried chicken, and a stir-fry with bell peppers and pork. I hoped a nice meal would bring some peace to the house, some sense of normalcy. Suddenly, Paul's voice cut through the quiet, breaking a long silence. "Bring me the mayo." "Sure, here you go," I replied, handing him the mayonnaise. These were his first words to me in ages, and they weren't kind or grateful, just another command. That small, simple moment felt like the last straw for me. It was the final test of my patience, and I felt something inside me snap. Things only got worse that evening. As we started to eat, Mrs. Lauren spoke up. "Clean the toilet," she demanded. "Right now?" I asked in disbelief, feeling a wave of anger rising inside. "Yes, now," she insisted, her voice laced with coldness. She didn't care that we were in the middle of dinner. It was just another way to control me, to show her power. I couldn't hold it in anymore. "Don't say such a thing while we're eating," I snapped. "It's nasty, just like your heart." Her face twisted with anger, and soon, we were in a heated argument. Paul jumped in, siding with his mother, and demanded I apologize to her. But for the first time in years, I stood my ground. I refused to back down, and in that moment, a deep realization hit me. I needed to escape this toxic environment. Not only for myself, but for my son, who deserved better than this. I retreated to my room, my mind made up. I went online, downloaded divorce papers, filled them out, and marched back into the living room. I slammed the papers down in front of Paul. His face showed pure shock, but I felt only a cold sense of determination. "I'm filing these," I said, my voice steady and calm. Standing there, looking at my husband's stunned face, I realized that I had finally stepped out of the shadows. I was ready to reclaim my life. The days that followed were tense, filled with cold glares and biting comments. Mrs. Lauren looked at me with even more disdain, and Paul threw sarcastic remarks my way. But amidst all the chaos, I felt a strange new sense of freedom. One evening, as I served dinner, Mrs. Lauren sneered, "You call this food? Even a child could cook better." Ignoring her, I focused on my son's happy face. "Eat up, sweetheart," I said gently. "I made your favorite tonight." Paul chimed in with a mocking tone. "Oh, playing the perfect mother now, are we? What a joke." I felt the anger rising but kept my calm. "I'm just trying to make a nice dinner for our son." Mrs. Lauren scoffed. "Don't act so high and mighty. You're just a burden in this house." Paul added, "So, Janet, have you thought about how you'll survive after the divorce? You can barely keep a house, let alone your own life." I looked him straight in the eye, feeling a newfound strength within me. I was no longer that shadow, and I was ready to face whatever came next. I had been supporting this family for years, working hard and managing most of the household expenses. I looked straight at Paul and said, "I'm not worried about taking care of myself and our son." I saw his confident smirk fade slightly as a flicker of unease crossed his face. Mrs. Lauren jumped in quickly. A plan? Don't be ridiculous. You need us more than we need you, she scoffed, her words filled with disdain. The conversation shifted to money, a topic they usually avoided. You both know that without my salary, this household would struggle, I stated, partly to remind myself of my own value. Mrs. Lauren dismissed me with a wave. We'll manage just fine. We don't need your pity money, she sneered. But Paul was silent. He knew the truth, that without my income, they would be in serious trouble. In the days that followed, their behavior became strange and unpredictable. Mrs. Lauren would switch between acting sweet and then throwing insults if I didn't do as she pleased. Paul, meanwhile, looked lost, his arrogance fading as he began to realize just how much they depended on me financially. One afternoon, I accidentally overheard them talking. Paul was upset. She can't leave us like this, he hissed. We need her money. Mrs. Lauren's reply was cold and calculated. Don't worry, I have a plan. We'll make her life so miserable, she won't dare to leave. Hearing their true intentions hit me like a cold wave. They didn't care about me, or even about our son. It was all about control and money. That night, as I lay in bed, a plan started forming in my mind. If they wanted a fight, I would give them one. But I wouldn't waste my energy on pointless arguments. I would hit them where it hurt the most, their pride and their pockets. The next morning, I began taking steps to protect myself and my future. I contacted a lawyer, a tough, smart woman who came highly recommended. I want a divorce, I told her firmly, and I want to make sure they don't get a penny more than they deserve. She nodded with a determined look. We'll make sure of that. You've been the main provider, right? That will work in your favor. Over the next few days, I felt my resolve grow stronger. I started documenting everything, the insults, the manipulation, and every small way they tried to control me. It was time for them to face the consequences of their actions. For the first time in years, I felt empowered, like I was finally in control of my life. The shadows that had hung over me for so long were beginning to lift, and I felt the promise of a new beginning. When the divorce proceedings started, the atmosphere in the house grew more toxic. But each day, my fear lessened, replaced by a fierce determination. One evening, Mrs. Lauren tried a different tactic. Janet, dear, she began in a sugary tone, why don't we forget about all this unpleasant business? You know we're family. But her words felt empty, dripping with insincerity. I had seen her true intentions, and I knew that no amount of sweet talk could erase the years of mistreatment. I was ready to break free and start anew, for myself and for my son. The time for living in fear and shadows was over. I looked straight into Mrs. Lauren's eyes, firm and unafraid. Family doesn't treat each other the way you've treated me, I said, keeping my voice steady. Paul, who had been quietly watching, scoffed. Oh, playing the victim now? You're not as innocent as you pretend to be. I felt a rush of anger, but kept my calm. I'm not playing anything, Paul. I'm just done being your scapegoat. As usual, the conversation shifted to finances. Paul sneered. You think you can just take our son and leave? How will you support him? I let a small, confident smile cross my face. I've been supporting this family for years. I know I can manage. Mrs. Lauren's expression twisted into a sneer. You're nothing without us. You'll come crawling back. But their words no longer had any power over me. I knew my own worth now, and I knew the truth. The next day, I met with my lawyer again. She explained the plan clearly. We'll show the court how financially dependent they are on you. This will help in the custody case and division of assets. I nodded, feeling a sense of justice. The law was on my side, and I was ready to stand up for myself. At home, the tension was at its highest. Mrs. Lauren's attempts to put me down grew desperate. One evening, she spat. You think you're so smart, but you're just a cold-hearted woman abandoning her family. I looked her straight in the eye. No. I'm a woman who's finally standing up for herself. Paul joined in, his voice full of anger. You'll regret this. You can't survive without me. But his threats didn't scare me anymore. I was done being intimidated. Over the next few days, I focused on preparing for the court case. I gathered financial records, recorded their abusive comments, and documented every instance of their neglect. One afternoon, as I was organizing my papers, my son came up to me. "Mom, are we going to be okay?" he asked in a small, uncertain voice. I hugged him tightly, feeling a wave of protectiveness. "Yes, sweetheart. We're going to be just fine. We're leaving here, and we're going to start a new, happy life. Just you and me." His little arms tightened around me, and I knew I was making the right choice. I was fighting not just for myself, but for my son's future. As the court date drew closer, I felt a mix of fear and relief. This was my chance to finally break free from their control and give my son the peaceful life he deserved. I was ready to end their cycle of emotional abuse and take back my life. When the day of the court hearing arrived, I felt a surge of determination. This was the moment I had been preparing for. I was ready to face Paul and Mrs. Lauren, to end their control once and for all. I was determined to seek justice, to reclaim my life, and to give my son a future filled with happiness and peace. I sat across from Paul and Mrs. Lauren in the courtroom, feeling like I was in a dream. This was the moment when everything in my life would change. The judge began the proceedings, and there was a serious, formal atmosphere. Paul's lawyer spoke first, describing him as a caring husband and father who is suffering from false accusations. Mrs. Lauren pretended to be the poor mother-in-law, hurt by her ungrateful daughter-in-law. But their performance seemed fake and shallow, like they were putting on a show. When it was my turn to speak, I took a deep breath and kept my voice steady. I have been the main provider for this family for years. My husband's lack of work and his mother's constant manipulation have caused a lot of stress. Paul interrupted, trying to sound hurt. "Janet, how can you say these things? I've always supported you." I looked him in the eye. "Support is more than just words, Paul. It's about actions, and your actions have only shown selfishness and cruelty." The judge listened carefully as I shared my evidence. I had financial records, recordings of the harsh things they'd said to me, and statements from neighbors who had seen how they treated me. The truth was there for everyone to see, and as the evidence grew, Paul's fake kindness started to disappear. Mrs. Lauren's calm look faded, showing her real feelings underneath. Then came the part that sealed everything. My lawyer presented photos and documents proving Paul's infidelity and Mrs. Lauren's secret relationship with a wealthy neighbor, Mr. Jacob. The courtroom buzzed with whispers as these photos were shown, revealing them in situations that clearly showed their deceit. Their lies were finally out in the open. Paul's face turned pale, his eyes wide with shock. Mrs. Lauren's expression shifted from anger to panic, her hands shaking. You invaded our privacy," she shouted, her voice high and sharp. I looked at her, my voice steady. "No, I revealed the truth, a truth you both have been hiding for too long." The judge called for order in the court, but it was too late. Their carefully built stories were destroyed, their lies fully exposed. When the hearing ended, the judge made the decision. I was granted full custody of our son, and a fair division of our belongings was ordered. Paul and Mrs. Lauren were left with almost nothing but their broken reputations. Walking out of the courtroom, I felt a huge weight lift off my shoulders. Years of manipulation and emotional pain were finally behind me. I had faced my fears and won. The best moment came when my son ran into my arms outside the courthouse, his face filled with happiness and relief. "We did it, Mom," he said, his voice full of joy. "Yes, we did," I replied, holding him close. "We're free now. This is a new beginning for us." Hand in hand, we walked away, ready to start our fresh, happy life together. I realized that this victory wasn't just mine. It was for anyone who had ever been made to feel small, powerless, or unworthy. This was a win for truth and justice. It was the beginning of a new chapter, one filled with hope and a brighter future. After the court ruling, word of Paul and Mrs. Lauren's lies and betrayals spread quickly through our small community. Their reputations were shattered, and they could no longer pretend to be respectable. People saw them for who they really were. In the days following the court's decision, I focused on rebuilding my life with my son. Still, I couldn't deny the satisfaction of knowing that Paul and Mrs. Lauren were finally facing the consequences of their actions. I felt a deep sense of peace as I moved forward, knowing they were no longer able to control or hurt me. One evening, while I was preparing dinner, I heard a knock at the door. It was Mrs. Jacob, the wife of the man Mrs. Lauren had been secretly seeing. Her eyes were red from crying. "Janet, I heard about everything," she said, her voice breaking. "I can't believe what Mrs. Lauren did to you, and to me." I invited her in and made us both a cup of tea. As we sat at the kitchen table, she opened up, sharing her pain and heartbreak. "I trusted her," she whispered. "She was my neighbor, my friend, and all this time, she was betraying me." I listened, offering her comfort. It became clear that Mrs. Lauren's actions had hurt more than just me. They had destroyed the trust and friendships she had taken for granted. The next day, I ran into Paul while I was out in town. He looked nothing like the confident man he used to be. His arrogance was gone, replaced by a sad, defeated look. "Janet, please, can we talk?" he asked softly, barely able to meet my eyes. I stopped and looked at him. "What is there to talk about, Paul?" He shifted uncomfortably. I'm sorry for everything. I didn't realize how much I depended on you, on your strength." His apology, though late, showed me how much had changed. He had lost everything, his pride, his family, and his home. Only now did he seem to understand his mistakes. But his regret didn't change anything for me. I had moved on. Mrs. Lauren, however, was facing the hardest consequences. Her affair with Mr. Jacob had destroyed her reputation and even led to legal trouble. Mrs. Jacob had filed for divorce and was also suing her for alienation of affection, a lawsuit claiming Mrs. Lauren had interfered in her marriage. Neighbors gossiped about Mrs. Lauren's downfall, whispering about the proud woman who had now become an outcast. She was shunned by the very people who once called her a friend. Her actions had finally caught up with her, and she had no one to turn to. This journey had been difficult, but as I watched Paul and Mrs. Lauren face the results of their own choices, I felt nothing but relief. I knew I had made the right decision, not just for myself, but for my son. This new chapter was ours to write, and I was ready to fill it with peace, strength, and joy. I saw her at the grocery store, rushing through the aisles with her eyes cast down. She looked tired, defeated. For a brief moment, our eyes met. Her face twisted with anger as she passed by, and she muttered under her breath, "You did this to me." I watched her walk away, feeling a mix of pity and satisfaction. "No, Julie," I whispered to myself. "You did this to yourself." The wheels of justice had finally turned, and the consequences of her actions were now inescapable. Paul and Mrs. Lauren were living in the very mess they had created through years of lies and manipulation. Seeing them face the results of their choices was freeing. For so long, I had been caught up in their web, controlled by their words and actions. But now, as I watched them struggle, I felt a deep sense of peace. I realized that the best revenge wasn't anger or resentment. It was living well, free from their toxic influence. I turned my focus back to what really mattered, my son and our new life. Every day was a chance to rebuild, to create a life filled with joy and peace. I understood now that this wasn't just about revenge or seeing them fall. This was about freedom, breaking free from the chains of abuse, control, and fear. This journey had taught me strength and resilience. I had faced my fears, stood up to those who tried to belittle me, and I had won. But the real victory was the life I was now able to give my son. He deserved a home filled with love, safety, and kindness. And I was determined to give him that. As I looked to the future, I felt hopeful. I knew the best was yet to come. Free from the shadows of the past, I was ready to embrace a life of happiness and fulfillment. This was just the beginning, and I was excited for all that lay ahead. Hi, I'm Ashley, a 28-year-old graphic designer living my dream life in the big city. My days are filled with creativity, designing cool stuff, and enjoying the hustle and bustle of urban life. But every few weeks, I pack my bags and make the trip back to my small hometown to spend some quality time with my family. My family is the best, or at least most of them are. There's Mom and Dad, who always seem to have the perfect advice for everything. My big brother, James, who's a bit overprotective but always has my back. Then there's my little sister, Lauren, a bubbly 17-year-old who looks up to me and always wants to hear my stories about city life. And, of course, there's Aunt Cheryl. Now, Aunt Cheryl is a whole story on her own. "Ashley, honey, your aunt's just particular," Mom would say whenever I mentioned Cheryl's behavior. Mom always tried to make it seem like Aunt Cheryl was just a little quirky. But deep down, I knew the truth. Aunt Cheryl didn't like me. I don't know why, but it was clear she'd had it out for me from the day I was born. The backhanded compliments and judgmental looks were her specialty. Like the time I landed my dream job at a cutting-edge design startup. I was so excited, practically bursting to tell everyone at dinner. But her response? "Oh, how nice for you, Ashley. It's good to know they're giving opportunities to all kinds of people these days." The words were polite, but the tone was dripping with sarcasm. Classic Aunt Cheryl. Still, I tried not to let it get to me. Family is family, right? You take the good with the bad. Things took an interesting turn a few months ago when my parents decided to get a dog. I was thrilled. I've always loved animals, and I'd been dreaming of them getting a pet for years. They brought home a gorgeous pit bull puppy named Jack. Dad couldn't stop talking about how smart and energetic Jack was, and I fell in love the moment I saw him. But things didn't go the way I imagined. From the very first time Jack met me, something felt off. At first, he seemed wary, standing back and watching me with cautious eyes. Then it got worse. Every time I visited, he would growl or snap at me. I tried to brush it off, thinking it was just a phase or some kind of puppy behavior. Maybe he's just protective of his new home, I told myself. But Jack's behavior became harder to ignore. One afternoon, I reached out to pet him, hoping to show I meant no harm. To my shock, he lunged at me, baring his sharp teeth. My boyfriend, Brian, had to step in and pull me back. "Babe, this isn't normal," Brian said, his voice full of concern. "Dogs don't act like that without a reason." I tried to shrug it off, but deep down, I was shaken. Jack's behavior toward me was starting to freak me out. Why would he act like this when he was perfectly fine with everyone else? The tension finally boiled over during my last visit home. We were having a family dinner, and I was helping Mom in the kitchen, chopping vegetables and chatting about my latest project. From the living room, I heard raised voices. "Cheryl, this has to stop." Dad's voice was louder and angrier than I'd ever heard before. "I don't know what you're talking about." Aunt Cheryl snapped back, her tone defensive but unconvincing. I froze, knife in hand, straining to hear what was going on. Mom shot me a worried glance, but said nothing. Curiosity got the best of me, and I quietly stepped closer to the kitchen door, trying to catch the conversation. "You've been sneaking around, doing God knows what, and now look what's happening." Dad's voice was full of frustration. "What are you accusing me of?" Aunt Cheryl shot back, but there was a sharp edge to her tone, almost like she knew exactly what Dad was talking about. "Jack's behavior isn't normal," Dad continued. "And I know you've been feeding him something to make him act like this. We found the scraps you've been slipping him." My stomach dropped. Feeding Jack something? What could Aunt Cheryl possibly be giving him?
And why?
"Don't be ridiculous," Cheryl huffed, but her voice wavered slightly. "You're blowing this way out of proportion." "Am I?" Dad countered. "Then why does Jack only act this way around Ashley? What's your problem with her?" I felt a cold chill run down my spine. So this wasn't just in my head. Aunt Cheryl had been up to something, and whatever it was, it had turned Jack against me. The room fell silent for a moment, and I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. Then Cheryl spoke again, her voice icy. "Maybe Ashley just isn't good with animals. Some people aren't, you know." I'd had enough. I walked into the living room, my hands trembling, but my head held high. "What's going on here?" I asked, my voice steady despite the chaos I felt inside. Aunt Cheryl looked at me, her expression unreadable. Oh, nothing, dear. Just a little family discussion. Really? I said, crossing my arms. Because it sounds like you've been doing something to make Jack hate me. Care to explain? She didn't answer, but the guilty look in her eyes told me everything I needed to know. That night, the tension lingered like a storm cloud. I didn't get all the answers, but one thing was clear. Aunt Cheryl's strange behavior wasn't just harmless quirkiness. She had gone too far this time, and I wasn't going to let it slide. As I drove back to the city the next morning, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. Something told me Aunt Cheryl wasn't done yet, and I needed to be ready for whatever came next. I edged closer, straining to hear every word. Jack's behavior toward Ashley isn't normal, and I think you know why. Mom's voice was firm, but filled with worry. My heart pounded in my chest. What was going on? Why was Jack acting this way toward me? I stood frozen, trying to piece it all together, but my instincts told me something big was about to unravel. Whatever this was, it wasn't just about a misbehaving dog. As I stood there, my thoughts spiraled. This wasn't just family drama. It felt bigger, more sinister. And somehow, I was at the center of it all. After that tense dinner, I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't imagining things. Something was off with Jack, and I had to figure out what it was. No way was I going to let Aunt Cheryl manipulate the situation and make me feel like I was crazy. The next day, I came up with a plan. I called Brian, my boyfriend, for backup. "Hey, Brian," I said, trying to sound casual, "do you still have those mini spy cameras? You know, the ones your old paranoid landlord gave you for security." Brian chuckled on the other end. "Yeah, I've still got them."
"Why?
"You planning on going full James Bond or something?" "Something like that," I replied, lowering my voice. "I need to find out what's really going on with Jack." Brian hesitated, but eventually agreed to help. A few days later, we drove to my parents' house when no one was home, carrying the tiny cameras in a backpack. Setting them up around the house was nerve-wracking. My heart raced with every click of the camera as we adjusted their positions. "If we get caught, I'm blaming you," Brian whispered, glancing nervously toward the windows. "Relax," I said, trying to sound confident even though my palms were sweaty. "This is for a good cause." Over the next week, I was constantly on edge, waiting to catch something on the cameras. Every time my phone buzzed with an alert, I felt a mix of fear and anticipation. Then one evening, I finally hit the jackpot. I nearly dropped my phone when I saw the footage. There was Aunt Cheryl, sneaking into my parents' house when no one else was home. She was holding one of my old sweaters, something I had left behind months ago, and using it to train Jack. "Get her, Jack." "Attack," she whispered sharply, waving the sweater like a flag in front of him. Jack lunged at it, growling and tearing into the fabric. Cheryl clapped her hands in approval, praising him every time he got aggressive. My blood ran cold. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. My own aunt was training our family dog to hate me, to attack me. Who does something like that? What kind of person goes to such twisted lengths? I felt a wave of anger and disbelief wash over me. My hands trembled as I dialed my brother, James. He picked up on the second ring. "Hey, Ashley, what's up?" "James," I said, my voice shaking, "you're not going to believe this. I have proof, actual proof, that Aunt Cheryl has been training Jack to attack me." There was a long pause. "Wait, what?" "Ashley, that's a pretty serious accusation. Are you sure about this?" "I've got it all on video," I said, cutting him off. "It's clear as day. She's been sneaking into the house when no one's home and using my clothes to train Jack." James, ever the logical one, quickly switched into lawyer mode. "Okay, don't do anything drastic. Let me come over and see the evidence first. We'll figure this out together." Later that night, James came over to my apartment. I showed him the footage on my phone, replaying the moment Cheryl encouraged Jack to tear apart my sweater. His face went pale. "Jesus Christ, Ashley," he muttered, leaning back in his chair.
I don't even know what to say."
"It's disgusting." We decided it was time to confront our parents. That night, we sat Mom and Dad down in the living room and played the footage for them. The room was silent except for the sound of Aunt Cheryl's voice echoing from my phone. Mom's face turned white, and she clutched her chest like she couldn't believe what she was seeing. "No, this can't be true," she whispered, shaking her head. Dad, on the other hand, looked furious. His jaw tightened, and his hands balled into fists. "What kind of person does this?" he said, his voice low but boiling with anger. "Mom, Dad, I don't know why she's doing this, but it's clear Aunt Cheryl has been trying to turn Jack against me," I said, my voice firm despite the lump in my throat. Mom kept repeating, "This isn't possible. Cheryl wouldn't do something like this," but even she couldn't deny the evidence in front of her. We all knew what had to happen next. Aunt Cheryl needed to be confronted. This wasn't just about a dog anymore. This was about trust, betrayal, and family. And I wasn't going to back down until the truth came out. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Dad sat there stunned, replaying the video over and over as if watching it on loop would somehow make it less real. The room was heavy with silence until Dad finally spoke, his voice low and steady. "We need to confront Cheryl." And so, that's exactly what we did. The next family dinner felt like walking into a battlefield. The tension in the air was so thick it was almost suffocating. Everyone was there: Mom, Dad, James, Lauren, a few cousins, and of course, Aunt Cheryl. I could feel her eyes on me the moment I walked in, but I didn't flinch. "How could you do this, Cheryl?" Mom's voice cracked, and tears welled up in her eyes as she held the phone with the incriminating video. Cheryl, true to form, denied everything. She leaned back in her chair, her face tight with feigned innocence. "This is ridiculous," she said, waving a hand dismissively. "That video is obviously fake. Ashley's always been jealous of me. She probably doctored it herself." Her voice shook slightly, betraying her nerves. Jealous? Of her? The sheer audacity of her claim made me laugh out loud, though it was more out of disbelief than humor. "Me? Jealous of you? That's a good one, Cheryl," I said, crossing my arms. Things escalated quickly. Lauren, my little sister, looked like she was about to cry. She hesitated, then said softly, "Maybe it's just a misunderstanding?" Her voice trailed off as she looked around, searching for someone to agree with her. James wasn't having any of it. He stood up, his face a mix of anger and disgust. "This is no misunderstanding, Lauren. The proof is right there," he said, pointing at the phone. "It's clear as day what's going on." The family was suddenly split down the middle. Mom, Dad, and James were firmly on my side, furious with Cheryl. Lauren and a couple of our cousins, however, seemed to buy into Cheryl's innocent act, nodding along as she spun her web of lies. As for me, I was a wreck. Seeing my family like this, torn apart and at odds with each other, was killing me. The weight of it all started to take a toll. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I was haunted by nightmares. Brian noticed the change in me and tried to help. "Babe," he said gently one evening, "you should talk to someone about this. It's a lot to deal with." But I couldn't, not yet. Not until I was sure Aunt Cheryl wouldn't be able to hurt anyone else in our family. Little did I know, things were about to spiral even further out of control. Cheryl might have thought she'd won this round, but I wasn't about to let her get away with it. No way. I called Brian and James for a strategy session the next day. Sitting in Brian's living room, we brainstormed for hours. "We need to catch her in the act," I said, pacing back and forth. "This time, everyone has to see it for themselves. No more denying, no more excuses." "What if we set up a fake family gathering?" Brian suggested, tapping his chin thoughtfully. James nodded. "That could work. We'll make it look like a regular dinner, but we'll bring in someone who can professionally observe Jack's behavior without Cheryl knowing." It was a solid plan, and we wasted no time putting it into action. James reached out to a top-rated animal behaviorist, Dr. Frank, who agreed to help. Meanwhile, I realized we'd need extra surveillance that Cheryl wouldn't suspect. That's when I thought of our tech-savvy cousin, Scott. I gave him a call. "Hey, Scott, how do you like to play spy for a day?" "Hell yeah," he replied, immediately intrigued. "What's the mission?" I filled him in on the details, and he was all in. Within a day, Scott hooked us up with some seriously stealthy surveillance gear, promising it would capture everything without raising any alarms. The day of the gathering arrived, and my nerves were in overdrive. Everyone filed into the house, chatting and laughing as if it were just another family dinner. Aunt Cheryl showed up last, her sharp eyes scanning the room. She greeted everyone with a forced smile, but when her gaze landed on me, it was anything but friendly. "Well, isn't this a lovely surprise?" she said, her tone sweet but her smile not reaching her eyes. Dr. Frank, posing as Brian's coworker, blended into the group seamlessly. He mingled with the family while quietly observing Jack from the sidelines. Everything was set up perfectly. The plan was simple. We had arranged a series of scenarios to trigger Jack's aggression toward me, hoping to catch Cheryl's interference in real time. The first test began when I casually reached for a plate of food near Jack. His reaction was immediate. He growled, his hackles raised, and his gaze fixed on me with hostility. Dr. Frank took notes silently, his expression unreadable. Aunt Cheryl, meanwhile, watched the scene unfold with a flicker of satisfaction in her eyes. But we weren't done yet. The second scenario involved me holding a toy that Jack liked. The moment I picked it up, he lunged at me, barking ferociously. Cheryl's face betrayed her excitement for a brief moment before she caught herself and looked away. By the third test, it was clear something was wrong. Dr. Frank stepped forward, addressing the family in a calm but serious tone. "This isn't normal behavior for a dog. Jack has been conditioned to associate Ashley with aggression. I'm almost certain this was deliberate." Aunt Cheryl's face turned pale. "That's absurd," she snapped, her voice shaking. "You don't know what you're talking about." But the evidence was piling up, and Cheryl knew it. The family was finally starting to see the truth, and I could feel the tide turning in my favor. This battle wasn't over yet, but for the first time, I felt like I had the upper hand. I accidentally bumped into Aunt Cheryl, spilling her drink. "Oh my gosh, I'm so clumsy. Let me help you clean that up," I said quickly. As I bent down to pick up a napkin, Jack started growling fiercely. Dr. Frank raised an eyebrow and scribbled something in his notebook. The tension in the room was growing. A little later, I offered to help Mom in the kitchen. As I passed by Jack, he lunged at me, barking loudly and baring his teeth. "Whoa!" Brian shouted, pulling me back just in time. That was way too close. From across the room, I caught Aunt Cheryl smirking. She didn't even try to hide it. Dr. Frank quietly pulled James aside. "This behavior is extremely unusual," he said. "It's clear the dog has been trained to target your sister specifically. We were building our case, but we needed solid proof, the final piece of the puzzle. It was time for the last act." "I'm heading upstairs to grab something from my old room," I announced, making sure Cheryl could hear. Just as I expected, she quickly made up an excuse to follow me. In my room, I pretended to search through the closet. That's when I heard it. "Jack, attack." I spun around and saw Jack charging at me, teeth bared, while Aunt Cheryl stood there, pointing and yelling commands. My heart stopped for a second. But before Jack could reach me, Brian burst into the room and tackled the dog. "What the hell, Cheryl?" Brian shouted angrily, holding Jack back. Cheryl froze, her face pale as she realized she'd been caught red-handed. "I didn't mean it, she stammered, but her excuses were useless. James appeared in the doorway, holding up his phone. "It's over, Cheryl. We've got everything on video." We all headed downstairs, where the rest of the family was gathered around Scott's laptop. They were watching the live footage in stunned silence. Mom was sobbing, her face buried in her hands. "How could you, Cheryl? She's your niece." Dad looked like he was about to explode with anger. "Get out of my house."
Now?
Cheryl tried to defend herself, her voice trembling. "It's not what it looks like. Ashley's turned you all against me." But no one believed her anymore. The evidence was clear. Everyone watched in horror as the video revealed months of Aunt Cheryl's cruel actions, training Jack to attack me and manipulating the situation to make me look bad. As Cheryl was escorted out of the house, Dr. Frank walked up to me. "I've documented everything," he said. "If you want to press charges, you have a strong case." I looked around the room. My family was shattered. Jack was cowering in a corner, confused and scared. And Cheryl's figure grew smaller as she walked away. "No," I said finally, my voice firm. "I think karma will handle this one." Little did I know I was right. After Cheryl left, the house was eerily quiet. Everyone was trying to process what had just happened. Dad was the first to speak, breaking the silence. I can't believe she'd stooped this low. Ashley, honey, I'm so sorry we didn't believe you sooner. I shrugged, still feeling numb. It's okay, Dad. At least now, everyone knows the truth. Mom was pacing back and forth, wringing her hands. Should we call the police? This has to be illegal, right? James, always calm and logical, stepped in. Let's take a moment to breathe. Ashley, it's your call. Do you want to press charges? I looked around at my family. Jack was still cowering in the corner, and I let out a deep sigh. No, I don't think I want to press charges. I just want this nightmare to be over. Just as I said that, we heard a loud noise outside. Curious, we all rushed to the window. There was Aunt Cheryl stomping down the porch steps, muttering angrily under her breath. You ungrateful brats. After everything I've done for this family, what happened next felt like something straight out of a comedy show. Jack's leash, which had been hanging loosely on the porch railing, somehow got tangled around Aunt Cheryl's feet. She took one angry step forward, and wham! She tumbled down the stairs, flipping head over heels. Oh my God! Mom gasped, rushing outside. We all followed, even Jack, who looked confused by all the noise. Aunt Cheryl was sprawled at the bottom of the stairs, wailing in pain. My arm, my leg. Look what you've done to me, she cried dramatically. Dad knelt beside her, trying to stay calm. Don't move, Cheryl. We're calling an ambulance. As we waited for the paramedics to arrive, Aunt Cheryl finally broke down. Tears streamed down her face as she sobbed uncontrollably. I'm sorry, okay? I'm sorry. Is that what you want to hear? Her words caught us all by surprise. I was jealous, she admitted, her voice shaky. Ashley always had everything. The looks, the brains, everyone's love. I couldn't stand it anymore. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. All of this, everything she did to hurt me, was because she was jealous? It was beyond messed up. Aunt Cheryl, you could have seriously hurt me, I said, staring at her in disbelief. I know, she whispered, avoiding my eyes as tears streamed down her face. I don't know what I was thinking. When the ambulance finally arrived, they carefully loaded Aunt Cheryl onto the stretcher. Watching her being taken away, I couldn't help but think about the irony of the situation. The very dog she trained to hurt me had ended up causing her downfall. After Aunt Cheryl was whisked away to the hospital, we all gathered in the living room. The house felt heavy with emotion. What now? Lauren asked, her voice small and uncertain. Dad let out a long sigh, his shoulders slumping. Now we heal. As a family, in the weeks that followed, we worked hard to repair the damage. Dr. Frank recommended a great dog trainer to help Jack, and we all pitched in to support his rehabilitation. Slowly but surely, Jack became calmer and happier. Good boy, Jack. I praised one afternoon as he sat calmly at my feet, wagging his tail. He was like a completely different dog, sweet, gentle, and full of love. It was hard to believe he was the same aggressive pup from just a month ago. As for Aunt Cheryl, karma had done its job. She ended up in a rehabilitation center with a broken arm and leg. No one in the family went to visit her. It felt harsh, but after everything she had done, it also felt fair. A couple of months later, I decided it was time for a fresh start. I planned a big backyard barbecue and invited everyone over. It was a chance to put the past behind us and focus on happier times. As I flipped burgers on the grill, I looked around at my family. Mom and Dad were laughing and chatting with James and his new girlfriend. Lauren was in the yard, playing fetch with Jack, who had turned into the sweetest dog anyone could imagine. Brian walked up behind me and wrapped his arms around my waist. How are you feeling, babe? He asked softly. I smiled, leaning into him. I feel good, I said honestly. Better than I have in a long time. And for the first time in months, I truly meant it. I leaned back into Brian and smiled. You know what? I feel good. Really good. And I meant it. Sure, we'd been through a lot, absolute chaos, really, but somehow we made it through. And we came out stronger on the other side. I glanced across the yard and saw Jack happily running around, his tongue hanging out and his tail wagging like crazy. That moment made me realize everything was going to be okay. They say, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, and in this case, it also made our family closer than ever. So that's the end of my wild story, folks. But now, I've got a question for you. If you were in my shoes, would you have pressed charges against Aunt Cheryl? Or do you think karma gave her the punishment she deserved? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear what you would do in this crazy situation. And if you enjoyed this roller coaster of family drama, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more unbelievable stories. Until next time. Why are you here? Do you want to know? Let me explain. My name is Christine. I'm a 33-year-old woman working as an engineer for a manufacturing company. I've been married to my husband, Logan, for 7 years. We are a dual-income couple with no children yet. One day, I hope to have kids and take maternity leave while continuing my career. However, everything changed unexpectedly. One day, on my way home from work, I was involved in an accident. Logan was on a long-term business trip overseas at the time. My parents rushed to the hospital and took care of everything, including the admission paperwork. They also informed Logan about the accident right away. Despite their efforts, I felt it was important to talk to Logan myself, especially after hearing the doctor's explanation. When I called Logan, I said, "Hey Logan, I'm sorry to surprise you with this news." He replied, clearly worried. Really, I was shocked. "I can't come back right away, but how are you? Are you okay?" "I've already informed my company, and I'll return in 5 days." I could sense his concern over the phone, so I explained, "It seems I've been left with paralysis on one side of my body because of the accident." "What? Paralysis on one side of your body? Will it get better with rehab?" he asked, his voice filled with shock. I told him the truth. No, it seems it won't get better anymore. Logan went silent for a moment. I could tell he was struggling to process what I had just told him. I then gathered my courage and shared a decision I had made. "Logan," I said softly, "I don't want to be a burden to you. Your hobbies are outdoor activities and going to festivals. If we stay together, you won't be able to enjoy those things anymore. That's why I think we should get a divorce." There was a long pause. I understood his silence. If you were told someone you loved had permanent paralysis, you'd be confused too. On top of that, being suddenly asked for a divorce would leave anyone in shock. After a few minutes, Logan finally spoke. "Okay, if you say so, Christine. You're stubborn, and once you make up your mind, you don't change it?" "Yes, thank you for understanding," I replied, trying to hold back tears. After Logan agreed to the divorce, we ended the call. From then on, we switched to texting. I told him I would ask my parents to leave the divorce papers in our living room the next day. I also mentioned that we would discuss the distribution of property and other details after I was discharged from the hospital. Lastly, I asked him not to visit me at the hospital. Seeing him would be too painful for me, even though I was the one who brought up the divorce. It was one of the hardest decisions of my life, but I believed it was for the best for both of us. I was surprised at how quickly Logan agreed to the divorce. But I reminded myself that he has his own life, and I have mine. There's no time to feel sad or stay stuck in the past. I needed to focus on the next chapter of my life immediately. As planned, I asked my parents to prepare the divorce papers. I told them to place the documents in the living room for Logan to sign when he returned. 5 days later, as expected, Logan came back. He went to our home, signed the papers, and filed them as we had agreed. That day, he called me briefly after finishing the paperwork. "I just got back from the office," he said. "I see. Take care, Logan," I replied. "You too, Christine." And just like that, with a short, simple conversation, our 7 years of marriage came to an end. About a week after the divorce was finalized, I found myself waiting in the lobby of the city hall. I wasn't alone for long. Hey, this way. Hurry up." I heard a woman's voice calling out excitedly. "Calm down, Madison. We still have plenty of time before they close," said a man beside her. A couple hurried toward the counter, looking cheerful. I stood in front of them, smiling warmly. "Long time no see, Logan. And nice to meet you, Madison," I said politely. Madison, meeting me for the first time, looked at me suspiciously. Who are you? How do you know my name? Are you some kind of stalker?" she asked, narrowing her eyes. Logan, on the other hand, froze. His face turned pale as he stared at me in shock. "Christine? What are you doing here? And why are you standing?" he stammered, his voice trembling with disbelief. His reaction made sense. The last time we spoke, I had told him I was paralyzed on one side of my body. Now, I was standing firmly on both feet, with no crutches or support. It had only been about a week since we separated, so his confusion was completely understandable. "Surprised to see me standing?" I asked calmly. "Of course I'm surprised. You said you were paralyzed, and that's why you wanted a divorce." I held back my tears and agreed, because I didn't want to make things harder for you, Logan replied, sounding hurt. I looked at him steadily and said, "Held back your tears? Logan, when I asked for a divorce, you agreed, without hesitation. And now, just days later, you're here with Madison and a marriage certificate. Is that what someone heartbroken would do?" Logan's face turned red as he tried to hide the marriage certificate behind his back. But it was too late. I had already seen it. Madison, still confused, asked, "Hey, who is this woman? And why is she talking to you like she knows you so well?" She sounded annoyed, clearly unaware of the situation. The awkward tension hung in the air as I waited for Logan to respond. I decided it was time to explain everything. I turned to Madison and said, "Nice to meet you. I'm Christine, Logan's ex-wife." Madison's face immediately changed, and she snapped, "What? You're that ex-wife? The one who ignored and looked down on Logan? He's told me so much about you, how you treated him terribly and just dumped him out of nowhere. I can't forgive someone like you." It was clear that Logan had been telling her all sorts of things about me while we were still married. Her outburst caught him off guard, and he quickly looked flustered. "Madison, don't say things like that," he stammered before turning to me. "Christine, you need to explain. Why did you say you were paralyzed, and now you're standing here perfectly fine?" I took a deep breath and calmly replied, "Actually, I wasn't in a major accident. There was a big accident near me, and it scared me so much that I fell and sprained my ankle. It was such a minor injury that I felt embarrassed about even being in the hospital." Both of them stared at me in shock. Logan's expression quickly changed to anger. "What? So you lied about being paralyzed just to get a divorce? Did you want to leave me that badly? Were you having an affair?" I looked at him directly and said, "Isn't that rich coming from you, Logan? You're here with Madison, getting married just days after our divorce. That's all the proof I need." Logan hurriedly defended himself. "No, that's not it. I just met Madison a few days ago. It was a fateful encounter, and we felt so connected that we decided to get married without even dating first." His excuse sounded ridiculous, and Madison wasn't about to stay quiet. She glared at him and argued, "How can you say that, Logan? We've been a loving couple for over a year. Even when Christine was causing you so much pain, I was there for you, supporting you. Don't act like what we have is something to hide." Her words left Logan visibly shaken. He put his head in his hands, realizing his excuses weren't holding up. Finally, he admitted, "Yes, I did have an affair with Madison. But that doesn't mean I can forgive you, Christine, for lying to me. Why did you pretend to be paralyzed?" I smiled slightly and replied, "It wasn't a lie exactly. Do you remember the accident I mentioned? When it happened, this prototype I was working on also got damaged. I reached into my bag and pulled out a small mechanical doll. This is a project I've been working on since I joined my company. It's a robot, and I had just finished its prototype. When the accident happened, the doll's left side stopped working. In a way, this doll now has hemiplegia, just like I said. And no amount of rehabilitation can fix it." Both Logan and Madison were speechless as they looked at the broken doll in my hands. "I'll be busy fixing the robot for a while, and I won't be able to join you for the outdoor activities and festivals you love. That's why I said we should break up," I explained calmly. Logan's face turned red with anger. That's nonsense. I don't believe you. You must have been cheating on me in secret and lied about the accident just to get a divorce. You were probably scared of paying compensation if your affair was exposed. Isn't that right? I sighed and said, yes, I lied about having hemiplegia, but it wasn't to cover up an affair or avoid paying anything. I knew you wouldn't agree to a divorce otherwise, so I had to find a way to separate from you. Why would I refuse a divorce? He snapped, though his expression told a different story. My words had hit a nerve. His face flushed and he looked defensive, but he wasn't convincing. Without saying another word, I pulled out a folder from my bag. Take a look at this, I said, holding up several documents. These are our pay slips since we got married. It's clear from these that you can't afford to live on your own. Someone in your position wouldn't agree to a divorce with someone like me, who earns much more, without putting up a fight. Stop it, Logan shouted, trying to grab the documents from my hands. But before he could, Madison leaned in, curiosity getting the better of her. Wait a minute, Madison said, grabbing one of the papers. Her face twisted in confusion as she read. What is this, Logan? You always bragged about having a high income and getting big executive bonuses. That's why we had those fancy dates and nice presents. Was all of that a lie? Were you using Christine's money all along? Logan stammered. And no,
It's not like that.
okay, yes, my salary is low, but together with both of our incomes, it was manageable. Sure, I might have exaggerated a bit, but isn't that normal? Just a little embellishment. Madison interrupted him with a glare. A little embellishment? You lied to me about everything. You made me believe you were rich. And now I find out you were living off Christine's salary? This is unbelievable. Without money, you're worthless to me. Let's break up. Wait, Madison, no. Logan begged, but she turned away from him. Right in front of me, she dumped him on the spot. Watching him get rejected so miserably calmed me a little, but it wasn't enough. Well, Logan, I said firmly, you lied to both of us, so this is your own fault. But don't think your punishment ends here. What do you mean? Christine, I've already been dumped. I'm your ex-husband. Can't you show me a little sympathy? He whined. Ignoring his complaints, I grabbed Madison, who was trying to storm out, and signaled to the lawyer I had waiting nearby. Who's that? Logan sneered. Oh, I get it. You're having an affair, aren't you? No, Logan, I said calmly. This has nothing to do with an affair. It's just justice catching up with you. I am Christine's attorney, the lawyer said calmly. What? Why does a lawyer need to talk to me? Logan asked, irritated. His tone was sharp, but the lawyer stayed calm and professional. The lawyer explained, Logan, you had an affair with Madison while you were still married to Christine. Because of this, you are required to pay compensation to Christine. He then turned to Madison, who looked visibly annoyed and confused. Madison, the lawyer continued, you knowingly had an affair with a married man. Therefore, you are also required to pay compensation to Christine. Madison's face twisted with anger.
Why?
All I did was believe his lies about being wealthy. I was deceived too. Why should I have to pay anything? She argued. Logan joined in, his tone defensive. I didn't really do anything wrong. Why do I have to pay? This is unfair. Both of them tried to avoid responsibility, coming up with excuses for why they shouldn't have to pay. But their arguments didn't stand a chance. They both knew I existed, yet they went ahead with their affair anyway. No matter how much they protested, I was determined to hold them accountable. After more back and forth, Madison reluctantly gave in. She signed the necessary agreements, though she looked like she wanted to scream. Logan, however, continued to resist. Then, out of nowhere, he said something outrageous.
Fine, he said.
I'll pay the compensation, but Christine, let's get remarried. That way, you can cover all the living expenses and entertainment costs like before, and I can use my entire salary to pay off the compensation quickly. I blinked, stunned by his absurd suggestion. Are you seriously suggesting that? I asked. Why on earth would I remarry someone who cheated on me and then tried to leave me when he thought I was paralyzed? What's the big deal? Logan replied, almost casually. I won't cheat anymore and you're fine now, right? Even if you're busy with work and can't join me for camping or festivals, I won't complain. So let's just get back together. Come on. His reasoning was so ridiculous that I could barely believe my ears. If you had a mechanical body, I thought to myself, I'd want to unscrew your head and replace your brain. But instead of saying that out loud, I replied firmly, Logan, there is absolutely no way I'm getting back together with you. You cheated, you lied, and you abandoned me when you thought I was at my lowest. Reconciliation is not an option, so don't even think about it. Logan finally seemed to realize that I was serious. With both my parents and his parents aware of the situation and fully supporting me, there was no one left on his side. Still, he wasn't done. I admit I have to pay compensation, he said with a smirk, but Christine, you should pay compensation too. Even after everything, he still tried to shift the blame. Typical Logan. I didn't want to keep listening to Logan's nonsense, but I decided to reply anyway. He smirked and said, you know why? Because you were cheating too, right? You lied about having partial paralysis just to get a divorce. Your lawyer said he wasn't your affair partner, which means you're still seeing someone else. I'll find out who it is and demand compensation from you. Get ready. I sighed, trying to stay calm. Fine, I said. If you're so determined, go ahead and investigate as much as you like. You can do it yourself or hire a private detective or an investigation firm. Use your own money and do whatever it takes to satisfy your curiosity. Over the next few weeks, I started noticing strange things. There were times when I felt like I was being followed on my way to work. My parents even mentioned seeing Logan lurking near their house. It was clear he was spying on me, hoping to find evidence of an affair. But since I wasn't cheating, there was nothing for him to find. To my surprise, I later learned that Logan had even skipped work without permission to spy on me. He was so obsessed with proving his baseless accusations that he neglected his job. 3 weeks later, I got a phone call from him. Christine, he started, his voice shaky. When are you going to admit to your affair? I've been skipping work without permission, and now my boss says they're going to fire me. Take responsibility and give me some money to live on. I couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity of his demand. What are you talking about? I said. You chose to skip work and follow me around. That was your decision, not mine. Don't blame me for your actions. I paused before continuing. So, did you find any proof of this so-called affair? If not, I suggest you stop this nonsense. Otherwise, I'll sue you for stalking. Madison already paid her compensation, but you're the only one still dragging this out. Of course, Logan had no evidence to back up his claims because I hadn't done anything wrong. Realizing he had no case, he finally gave up and reluctantly agreed to pay the compensation he owed me. After that, he was fired from his job, but he managed to find another one. Now, he pays me compensation from his new salary every month. However, in his rush to find work, he ended up at a terrible company. I've heard that he gets harshly scolded by his bosses and coworkers every day and often works late into the night. One day, he called me again, sounding desperate. Christine, please help me, he begged. But I knew better than to get involved again. I can't stand this life anymore. I promise I'll never cheat again. Please remarry me. I want to live a good life with your money, eat the meals you cook, and come home to you. Logan begged over the phone. My parents treat me coldly now, and I have no one but you. He sounded desperate, but his words didn't move me at all. I had no feelings left for him. No matter how much he complained about being alone, it didn't change how he had treated me. As long as he kept sending the monthly compensation payments, that was all I cared about. His personal struggles were no longer my problem. I ignored his calls and messages completely. At first, he kept trying to contact me, but eventually the messages stopped. After one particularly large payment, I never heard from him again. Some of my friends gossiped about what might have happened to him. They said he had been hospitalized because of overwork or that he might be involved in some shady business. I didn't know if those rumors were true, and honestly, I didn't care. Logan was no longer a part of my life. Now, I've completely moved on and focus all my energy on my work. I'm currently developing a new version of the mechanical doll, experimenting with different ideas and designs. It's exciting and fulfilling to be dedicated to something that has so much potential. By this time next year, I'm confident the mechanical doll will be ready for the market. The thought of seeing my hard work finally pay off keeps me motivated every day. I wake up looking forward to the future, feeling more focused and determined than ever. Logan is nothing but a distant memory now. My life is about building something meaningful and achieving my dreams. Each day brings me closer to the moment when I can see my work make a real impact, and that's all I need to feel content. I've decided to give the luxury car you bought to my parents. What are you saying? Mom and Dad are really excited. Wait a second. Did you buy the car just to give it to your parents? Yes, that's right. No matter what you say, the car is already theirs. If you don't agree, I'll divorce you. Divorce? At that moment, something inside me broke. I had always held back, but hearing him say that was too much.
Fine, I said.
If that's how you feel, then I'll do it. My name is Barbara. I'm 40 years old and work in an office. I live with my husband, Anthony, and our 9-year-old daughter, Ashley. Anthony and I both have stable jobs, so we live comfortably. Ashley is growing up well, and I try to stay happy in my own way. But not everything is perfect. My biggest complaint is about Anthony and how he treats his parents. Don't get me wrong, I think it's wonderful that he cares for his mom and dad. But sometimes it feels like he cares about them more than he does about me and Ashley. This has been a problem for years. One of the worst moments was when I went into labor with Ashley. I called Anthony at work and told him I was having contractions. I asked him to come to the hospital because our baby was about to be born. But Anthony said, "Sorry, I can't. My mom burned her finger, and I'm going to their house to help her." I couldn't believe it. How could he think his mom's burn was more important than being there for the birth of his child? It turned out that his mom had touched a hot pen by accident. The burn was small, and all she had to do was cool it under running water. She was fine, but Anthony rushed over like it was a life-or-death emergency. It wasn't just his mother I was upset with, it was Anthony, too. Why couldn't he see how important that moment was? Another time, when Ashley was turning 1, we planned a special celebration for her birthday. But my in-laws had scheduled a trip and asked Anthony to drive them to their destination. Anthony didn't just take them there. He stayed overnight at the hotel with them because they could book an extra room. Meanwhile, I was at home with Ashley, celebrating her first birthday alone. I couldn't believe he chose a trip with his parents over our daughter's milestone. Anthony is a hardworking man, and he's usually kind to me. But when it comes to his parents, he always puts them first. I've tried to understand, but it hurts when Ashley and I feel like we're not his priority. And now, with the car situation, I'm wondering how much longer I can live like this. I started feeling distrustful towards Anthony after everything that happened. This wasn't just a one-time issue. It kept happening again and again. But even though I was hurt, I couldn't bring myself to divorce him. I still loved Anthony, and I didn't want to take away my daughter's father just like that. Anthony wasn't completely uncaring about our daughter, Ashley. He showed that he loved her in his own way, so I held on to the hope that one day he would put her first. But since Ashley was born, Anthony has never celebrated her birthday with us. She's now 9 years old, and it's always the same. He seems to think that celebrating her birthday is something I should do by myself. I've tried my best to make sure Ashley doesn't feel lonely on her special day. One year, I even thought about inviting Anthony's parents to celebrate with us. When I asked them, they said, "It's too much trouble to come over." I was shocked. Sure, their house is about 3 hours away by car, but Anthony never thinks twice about driving that distance to visit them. Yet for them, it was suddenly a hassle to visit us for their own granddaughter's birthday. It felt selfish to me, but that wasn't even the worst of it. My mother-in-law is difficult in many ways. From the moment Ashley was born, she made it clear she wanted us to have a boy. She even said, "I told you I wanted a boy.
Why didn't you listen to me?"
I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Who says things like that? It's not like you can choose the gender of your baby. And honestly, why does it even matter? Anthony's family isn't some noble, traditional family where a son is necessary to carry on the name. My mother-in-law is just old-fashioned and stuck in her ways. She even shows less love toward Ashley because she's a girl. It breaks my heart to see her treat our daughter this way. Anthony, on the other hand, always tries to please his mother. I think that's one of the reasons he doesn't celebrate Ashley's birthday with us. He doesn't want to upset his mom by making her feel like we're prioritizing our family over hers. There have been other hurtful moments, too. One year, Anthony took me to his parents' house for their New Year's family gathering. My mother-in-law used that time to pick on me constantly. She'd say things like, "Barbara, why can't you move faster? Look, that person has an empty glass. Why don't you pour them a drink?" She treated me more like a servant than a daughter-in-law. It felt like she enjoyed bullying me. These moments piled up over the years, and it became harder and harder to ignore how much Anthony's loyalty to his mother was hurting our family. I was working in a brothel. She made fun of me in front of everyone, especially the relatives. She'd say things like, "My son is amazing, but his wife is a disaster. All she does is sit in an office and enter data. How does she not get bored doing such a meaningless job?" I couldn't believe her words. I've explained to her so many times that my job is not data entry. I'm an engineer. But she either doesn't understand or just refuses to listen. And even if I was doing data entry, why does she have to look down on it? That's a perfectly respectable job, too. It's not just me she ignores. She does the same to our daughter. For example, every New Year, she gives gifts to other relatives' children but skips our daughter entirely. It hurts me to see her treated like she doesn't matter. And what's worse is that Anthony never stands up for us. Whenever his mother insults me or our daughter, Anthony just sits there laughing along, pretending it's no big deal. Sometimes he even adds to the criticism, jokingly saying, "Yeah, my wife isn't great without me." It feels like he's trying to impress his family by putting me down. I stayed patient for a long time because I didn't want to take Ashley away from her father. But as the years went by, my love for Anthony slowly started to fade. It's hard to love someone who doesn't protect you or your child from unfair treatment. Then one day, Anthony came to me with a request. "Hey, there's something I've been thinking about buying," he said. "What is it?" I asked. "A car." "A cars?" I was shocked. Anthony had never shown any real interest in cars before. "Why all of a sudden?" "Well, I've been driving to my parents' house a lot lately, and I thought it would be nice to get a new one," he explained casually. "We live close to a supermarket, and I don't drive much. I'm not very interested in cars, so I figured if he wanted one, he could handle it." "Well, it's up to you," I told him. "You're the one who drives it the most." Anthony looked happy with my response, but then his tone changed, and he looked a little guilty. "Actually, here's the thing," he said. "I'll choose the car, and I want you to pay for it." I was stunned. Anthony wanted a car but couldn't afford it himself. He expected me to pay for it. The truth is, my salary has always been the main support for our family. When I was on maternity leave, Anthony didn't contribute his income to the household. I had to return to work right after giving birth, just to make ends meet. I'm an engineer, and I've worked hard for my career, yet Anthony keeps taking my efforts for granted. This car request felt like the final straw. I talked to my company and arranged to work remotely from home, so I could balance my job with raising our daughter. While managing work and parenting, I sometimes found it frustrating that Anthony used his salary only for himself and expected me to pay for big things, like the new car he wanted. Still, I decided to let him buy it. After all, when Anthony is in a good mood, he takes good care of our daughter. "Okay, are you sure?" I asked.
"Yes."
"Thank you," Anthony replied, thrilled. He immediately started looking through car catalogs and doing research online. Since I was the one paying, I tried to warm up to the idea. "Since it'll just be the three of us, we don't need a big car," I told him. Yeah, I know," he mumbled distractedly, not really paying attention. Anthony was more focused on visiting car dealerships and talking to dealers. After about 3 weeks, he told me he had found the perfect car and wanted to take me to the dealership. Anthony was so excited when we arrived at the store. I sat down, waiting for him to tell me what to do next. Soon, the dealer brought out the car. I couldn't believe my eyes. It was a large, luxury minivan. "Oh my gosh, are we really buying this?" I asked, shocked.
Yeah.
Isn't it great? I'm so excited, Anthony said with a big smile. Wait a minute, I said, trying to stay calm. We don't need something this big. It's way too much for just the three of us. Anthony brushed off my concern. Think about the future. It's better to have something sleek and roomy, just in case we have another baby, he insisted. I was stunned. Even if we did have another child, this car was far too big for a family of 4. Are we seriously buying this car? I asked again, hoping he'd reconsider. Anthony frowned, clearly frustrated. Why do you keep saying the same thing over and over? You're making the dealer uncomfortable. You're the one who said to leave it to me. I did, I admitted, but this is not what I had in mind. Anthony ignored me, signed the contract, and finalized the purchase. Then the dealer explained the price. My heart sank. It was way more expensive than I expected. I can't pay for this all at once, I said. We'll have to take out a loan. Anthony insisted the car loan be in his name, so we went ahead with it. From that point on, we were tied to monthly loan payments for a car I didn't even want. I couldn't shake the feeling that Anthony cared more about impressing himself than making practical choices for our family. I would deposit the money into Anthony's account every month to cover the car loan payments. That's how we managed to buy the car. Eventually, the car arrived at our house.
Wow.
It's so cool, Anthony said, grinning ear to ear as he admired it. I thought to myself, well, if he's this happy, maybe it's worth it. But I had no idea what was coming next. One weekend, Anthony grabbed the car keys, so I asked, "Are you going somewhere?" "Oh yeah, I'm heading to my mom and dad's," he said casually. "Wait, what? You're leaving Ashley behind to visit your parents again? And you're taking the new car?" I asked, already frustrated. Anthony then said something that completely shocked me. "Yep, that's right. I've decided to give the luxury car you bought to my parents as a gift." I froze. "What are you talking about?" "Mom and Dad are thrilled about it. Of course, I'll still drive it when we go out, but it's theirs now," he said happily. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Hold on a minute. Are you saying you bought this car just to give it to your parents?" "Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying," Anthony admitted. "You've got to be kidding me," I said, my voice rising. "You told me you wanted the car, so I agreed to buy it. If I had known it was for your parents, I would have never allowed it." Anthony shrugged. "It doesn't matter. It's already bought, it's in my name, and I can do whatever I want with it. If you disobey me, I'll divorce you." "Divorce?" I repeated, stunned. At that moment, something inside me snapped. For years, I had been holding back, trying to keep the peace for our daughter's sake. Even though Anthony always put his parents first, I believed he cared about our family too. But now, I realized he was willing to throw us aside without hesitation if it meant pleasing his parents. "Divorce, huh? If I disobey, you'll just leave?" I said, my voice trembling with anger. "Who do you think you are?" Anthony didn't respond, so I continued.
"Fine.
Let's get a divorce. I don't want you around anymore. Go back to your mom and dad, mama's boy."
What?"
Anthony said, clearly caught off guard. "I've had enough, Anthony. I'm tired of being second to your parents. I'm tired of you disrespecting me and ignoring our daughter. If you care so much about them, go live with them. I'm done." For the first time, I felt a sense of freedom. I had been patient for too long, but this was the last straw. If Anthony wanted to prioritize his parents over his family, then he could go back to them. Ashley and I deserved better. I decided to provoke Anthony, and just as I expected, his face turned red with anger. "You're mocking me, aren't you?" he snapped. "Fine then. Let's get a divorce right now." Anthony stormed off, sneering as he said, "I'll go get the divorce papers." He left for the city office, slamming the door behind him. While he was gone, I began packing my things. I called my parents, explained the situation, and asked them to come pick me and my daughter up. I told Ashley to pack her belongings as well. Soon after, Anthony returned, holding the divorce papers in his hand. "Here they are. Sign them," he demanded. His handwriting on the forms was bold and messy, showing how angry he was when he filled them out. Without hesitation, I signed my part. Well, here you go. I'll file it. Why don't you just leave now? Anthony said coldly. I'm going, don't worry. I don't need you to tell me, I replied. You're such a terrible wife, you know that? Anthony muttered, stomping around the house loudly. As I watched him, I wondered, why did I stay married to someone like this for so long? I regretted not leaving him earlier. But there was no point dwelling on the past. What mattered was that I was finally leaving. For the first time in years, I felt grateful to be taking this step. From now on, I'd focus on being the best mother I could be for Ashley. 10 minutes later, my parents arrived. Together, we packed up the last of my things and loaded them into their car. With everything ready, we left. After reaching my parents' house, I went to the city office to file the divorce papers. Once it was finalized, I felt an unexpected sense of relief. It was just a piece of paper, but knowing that Anthony and I were no longer married made me feel free and lighter. I decided to start looking for a new place where Ashley and I could live together. I was determined to create a better future for us. About a week later, while I was staying at my parents' house, something unexpected happened. I saw the luxury car Anthony had purchased parked outside. Curious and slightly irritated, I walked inside with Ashley. There, in the living room, were my ex-husband Anthony and my ex-in-laws, sitting together. My mother noticed me right away and quickly took Ashley to another room, giving me some space to deal with whatever was about to unfold. I stood there silently, watching them. My emotions were a mix of anger, disbelief, and a strange sense of closure. Whatever came next, I was ready to face it. My focus was now on building a better life for me and my daughter, away from the chaos of the past. I walked into the living room, and Anthony immediately started talking to me in a panic. Barbara, what's going on with the insurance for the car? He asked, sounding agitated. I looked at him coldly. What's the matter with you? Why are you barging into my parents' house like this? I replied firmly. At that moment, my ex-in-laws raised their voices angrily. We didn't want to come here either. We came because we had no other choice. Why are we being yelled at? They shouted defensively. My father, who had been quiet until then, spoke calmly but sternly. If that's the case, then leave. You're strangers to us now. If you don't go, we'll call the police to have you removed. Hearing this, my ex-in-laws became silent, clearly frightened by the suggestion. Meanwhile, Anthony, still looking panicked, turned to me again. Barbara, seriously, what's happening with the insurance payments for the car? He asked again, almost pleading. I let out a deep sigh. Did you forget what you said when you signed the contract? Asked, looking straight at him. You insisted that everything be in your name, the car, the loan, and all the paperwork. You said it was your car. So, you're the one responsible for paying the insurance. My words seemed to hit Anthony and his parents hard. Their faces turned pale as they realized the situation. Anthony had insisted on taking out the loan in his name, all because of his pride. He had wanted to show off by being the one to own the luxury car. Well, I continued, I didn't want that car in the first place. So, it's only fair that you're the one who has to deal with the payments. Anthony and his parents looked defeated, but then Anthony muttered something that made the situation even clearer. Oh no, he said quietly. I raised an eyebrow, waiting for him to explain. We had a little accident with the car. An accident? Asked, crossing my arms. Anthony hesitated but finally admitted, we were so excited about the new car that we drove it too fast. We ended up hitting another car on the road. The front of the car is completely wrecked. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. So that's why it was parked the way it was when I got here, I said, piecing it together. You parked it so I wouldn't see the front, didn't you? Anthony didn't respond. He just looked down, ashamed. His parents stayed quiet too, clearly embarrassed by what had happened. I stood there, feeling a mix of anger and relief. This whole mess was a reminder of why I'd made the right choice to leave Anthony. Whatever happened with that car and its payments was no longer my problem. It was Anthony's mess to clean up now, not mine. I didn't look at the car closely at first, but Anthony and his parents came to me about the insurance because they knew I had been in charge of payments. However, since the car was technically owned by the loan company, they were responsible for getting it repaired. And because they didn't have insurance, they now had to pay for all the repair costs themselves, plus the cost of fixing the guardrail they damaged. I couldn't help but wonder how expensive it would be to repair a luxury car. I was sure the bill would be huge. In the end, Anthony and his parents had no choice but to return the car. They were charged a massive amount of money for the repairs, leaving them in serious financial trouble. Not long after, I started receiving emails from Anthony. He kept begging me to get back together with him. In one message, he said they couldn't afford to pay their rent or utility bills anymore. Anthony had to move back in with his parents because of their money problems. However, things didn't go well for him there either. His parents, angry about the car and the financial mess, were very hard on him. Anthony couldn't handle their attitude and didn't want to stay at home, but he couldn't live on his own either because he had so much debt. Despite all this, Anthony kept insisting that he wanted to see our daughter, Ashley. I thought it was incredibly selfish of him to demand that now, after everything he had done. I decided I wouldn't allow it. I ignored all his emails and didn't tell him anything about the new house where Ashley and I had moved. At first, I was worried about how Ashley would feel. I wondered if she would miss her father, but to my surprise, she didn't seem to mind at all. Instead, she seemed happy and was enjoying her new life. Seeing her smile gave me strength. I made a promise to myself. I would keep working hard to give my daughter a good and stable life. I couldn't understand how Anthony could prioritize his parents over his own child. And asking me to pay for a car only to give it as a gift to his parents? That was something I could never forgive. In the end, Anthony ruined his own life. He made selfish choices, and now he's paying the price. I don't feel sorry for him. He brought it all on himself. As for me and Ashley, we're moving forward. I hope that from now on, we can live a happy life together. Ashley deserves a bright future, and I'm going to do everything I can to make sure she gets it. Hello, I'm Lily, and I'm 30 years old. I lost my parents when I was very young. They died in a car crash, and since they didn't have any family who could take care of me, I was sent to an orphanage. I stayed there for about 5 years until I was adopted. My adoptive parents turned out to be billionaires, so my life became pretty comfortable and happy after that. They didn't want my adoption to be a big deal, so they kept it private. They prefer to do good things quietly, without making a fuss. When I grew up and got my own place, my adoptive parents decided to travel around Europe to find new business opportunities. It was around that time I met Larry, my now ex-husband. We met in college and clicked right away. After a few conversations, I started liking Larry even more. He was a cheerful, kind guy who made me feel comfortable. Our dates soon turned into a serious relationship. We had what felt like the perfect relationship, except for one issue. Larry's family didn't like me. The first time I met them was after Larry and I had graduated from college. He waited until we both had good, stable jobs before introducing me to his parents. Larry had warned me that his family could be a bit judgmental when it came to the people their children dated, so I tried my best to make a good impression. I was really nervous when I finally met them. By then, Larry and I had been dating for about 6 years, and we were already engaged. I had a feeling that this might be a problem for his parents since they hadn't known me while I was just his girlfriend. I remember the day before we were going to meet Larry's parents. I was really nervous. "They're going to hate me, Larry," I said, feeling anxious. "They won't, I promise," Larry reassured me. "Don't you think they'll be shocked to find out we're engaged?" I asked. "Well, yeah, but I don't think it will be that big of a deal," he said. "Are you serious? You were worried about introducing me to them, because you know how judgmental they can be. And now you think telling them I'm your fiancé won't make it worse?" I asked, feeling doubtful. "Look, even if they do judge, does it really matter?" "It doesn't to me, but I don't know about you. You always seem so careful around them," Larry said. "I promise it won't change anything for me, Lily," he added. "All right, if you say so. But maybe we shouldn't tell them we're engaged right away. Maybe we can wait a month or so," I suggested. "If that makes you feel better, I'm okay with it," Larry said. "I don't mind either way. Let's keep it a secret for now, just to be safe." "I want them to like me," I said. "You have nothing to worry about." I'll be with you no matter what, he said, holding my hand. Thanks, Larry, I replied. I had been so nervous because every time I suggested he tell his parents about me, he would get worried, saying they might not accept me. By then, I started to understand why. Larry's family was wealthy and liked to live a luxurious life. They wanted the same for their children and expected them to date people who were equally rich, or even richer. I didn't live up to their standards back then. I hadn't told Larry much about my background because I didn't think it was important. Besides, when I realized why he was hesitant about introducing me, I felt it was better not to mention who my father was. I wanted them to like me for who I was, not for my money. I naively thought they would accept me for myself, but I was so wrong. We decided to meet Larry's parents at a fancy restaurant. As we walked in, Larry held my hand tightly. I wore my engagement ring on a necklace instead of on my finger, just to keep things quiet. I wanted to keep the ring with me, without anyone noticing it. When we got to our table, Larry's parents already looked upset. Larry had warned me about this because they were very strict about being on time, and we were 5 minutes late. It felt like we were off to a bad start right away. His parents gave me a quick look, then frowned as if they were disgusted. They ignored me for a while and only talked to Larry. I felt so small and invisible sitting there. The more they ignored me, the stronger the urge to leave grew. I kept my head down until Larry finally tried to include me. Mom, Dad, you can't just keep talking to me like this. This is my wonderful girlfriend, Lily, Larry said, trying to break the ice. Oh, hello. It's a pleasure to meet both of you, I said politely.
Hi.
I wish I could say the same, Larry's mom replied coldly.
Mom, what?
Larry asked, surprised. I'm just telling the truth, she said sharply. Then Larry's dad spoke up. So, Lily, I heard you and Larry met in college, right? He asked. Yes, we did. We shared some classes together, I said. And how did you manage to attend that college? From what I know, it's expensive and not easy to get into, he said, clearly skeptical. Dad, that's enough, Larry interrupted. Larry, don't speak to your father that way. It's a valid question, his mom said firmly. Lily, please answer him. Well, I got a full scholarship, I explained. I'm very grateful because I got to learn a lot and, of course, I met Larry, which has been one of the best things that happened to me. Of course, it's one of the best things that happened to you. He's rich, and you need that kind of money. At least you have some brains because you're not that good-looking, his mom said harshly. That's enough. We're leaving. Come on, Lily, Larry said, grabbing my hand. We walked out, and I was in shock at how his parents treated me. I couldn't believe people could be so openly cruel, right to my face. I was too stunned to even react. The car ride home was completely silent. Larry was fuming, and I just stared out the window, trying to make sense of what had happened. When we got home, Larry made sure to ask if I was okay, but honestly, I didn't even know how to feel. I dressed up nicely and made sure to sit properly. I didn't order anything expensive, trying my best to make a good impression. But somehow, without me even saying much, Amy and Adam had already decided what they thought of me. Larry didn't talk to his parents for a while after that. They texted him, saying we were disrespectful for walking out during lunch. Larry didn't reply until a month later, when he told them we were engaged. They weren't happy, but Larry warned them that he would cut off contact if they said or did anything against me. They offered to pay for our wedding, but only if they got to make all the decisions. Of course, neither Larry nor I liked that idea, so we chose to elope instead. My parents, who were in Europe at the time, knew about our decision. They were just happy that I was happy and even sent Larry and me a gift. Larry was a bit surprised when they sent us a very expensive painting, but I just said they had the money to do that, so it wasn't a big deal. After we got married, we met Amy and Adam again at a party they hosted. They invited us to celebrate their anniversary. Honestly, I was happy they invited me, even though I knew they didn't like me. But when we got there, I was ignored by everyone. If you think being ignored by 3 people is bad, imagine being ignored by about 40 people. It was much worse. I stayed close to Larry the whole night, but nobody talked to me. Whenever I tried to start a conversation, people would look me up and down and then walk away, or they would just keep talking to Larry like I hadn't said anything. By the end of the night, I was in tears. I felt humiliated and disgusted by how everyone treated me. Near the end of the party, the guests asked Amy and Adam to give a speech. I was tired and ready to leave, but I stayed to listen. In their speech, they began by saying how grateful they were to have almost everyone in the room in their lives. That was the first jab they took at me, and they kept making more throughout the speech. The guests laughed along with them, and at some point, I couldn't take it anymore. I stood up, left the room, ordered a lift, and went home. I cried the whole way home and kept crying until Larry got back. When he walked in, he looked upset and angry. "Why did you walk out like that? Do you know how embarrassing that was for me?" he said.
What?
"What are you talking about?" I asked, confused. "Don't play dumb, Lily." My parents yelled at me, and a lot of the guests felt sorry for me because I'm with you, he said sharply. "Are you serious? What about how embarrassing it was for me?" I replied, feeling hurt. "Come on, Lily. You could have put up with it for one night. It was my parents' anniversary, for God's sake," he said. "I was ignored by everyone, and your parents made fun of me in their speech. How do you expect me to be okay with that?" I said. "I'm not saying they were right, but you could have just dealt with it." "I would have talked to them later," Larry said. "What would that have done for me? I don't like being put in situations where I'm just humiliated." Everyone was laughing at me. "You've never had to feel that way, so it's easy for you to say it's no big deal," I said. "My parents expect an apology from you, and I want one too," he said firmly. "I'm not doing that unless they apologize to me first," I said. "I don't see why you need an apology. I've always stood up for you, so why is this different?" he asked. "It's different because this time they embarrassed me, your wife, in front of everyone. Maybe my parents were right about you," he said coldly. "Maybe your parents were right about me too," I said quietly. With that, Larry went to sleep in the guest bedroom. I couldn't understand why he had suddenly changed. It was always Larry who stood up for me, even when his parents said awful things. For me to walk out should have shown him just how hurt I was, but he didn't seem to care. For the next week, Larry didn't talk to me. His parents also sent me nasty texts, calling me ungrateful and an embarrassment. I tried to speak to Larry, but he kept shutting me out. Finally, I decided to apologize to him and his parents, even though it felt humiliating. I was willing to do it because I loved Larry, and I didn't want this to be the end for us. After that, things only got worse for me. Larry's parents retired and started hosting family dinners every week. Larry was always invited, and the first time they had one, he brought me along. As soon as I stepped inside their house, the mood in the room became tense. Amy was still getting ready, so she didn't see me right away, but Adam and Larry's siblings gave me awkward glances. No one spoke to me, and Larry left me standing alone while he chatted with his family. When Amy finally came downstairs and saw me, she rushed over, clearly furious. "What are you doing here?" she snapped. "Excuse me?" I said, taken aback. "No, I will not excuse you. What are you doing in my house?" she demanded. "Well, you invited us for dinner," I replied.
Wrong.
"I invited Larry." "This is a family dinner," she said sharply. "I'm Larry's wife, so I'm part of the family, aren't I?" I asked, trying to stay calm. "Absolutely not. An orphan like you doesn't belong in this family," she said, her voice full of disdain. "What? You can't seriously think that's a reason to exclude me," I said, shocked. "We do background checks on our children's spouses. You are not in my son's league, not even close. I will never accept you here," she said coldly.
Why?
"You can't just judge me based on that," I said, feeling hurt. "You're ugly and poor. You'd never fit into our elite circles," she said. "Why are you being so shallow? Are you really that worried I'll hurt your reputation just by being here? Doesn't the fact that I make your son happy matter to you?" I asked, struggling to hold back my emotions. "If happiness made money, everyone would be rich," she scoffed. "That's exactly why you'll never fit in with us. Or maybe I'll never be as shallow as you are, because I care about who a person really is." "You didn't even try to get to know me before judging me," I said. "Lily, that's enough," Larry interrupted, pulling out some cash. "Here, take this money and get yourself a lift." "Leave," he said, shoving the money into my hands. I stood there, stunned. looking at him as he turned back to his mother. She smirked at me, clearly satisfied. Tears filled my eyes as I turned and walked out. I cried the entire lift ride home. I couldn't understand why Larry had changed so much. Was this his way of making it up to his parents after what happened at the party? Whatever the reason, I felt hurt and angry. Larry was okay with his parents using my past against me, and instead of standing up for me like he always had, he was on their side. I wanted to shout and scream at him, but I knew that would only make things worse and prove them right about me. So I walked away, wondering what had gone wrong between us. I knew what I said was strong, but I didn't think I did anything wrong. I was just standing up for myself, and I did it calmly. After Larry got home, he went right back to not speaking to me. My heart was breaking, and I felt so alone. I knew he was expecting another apology from me, but I just couldn't do it. Like last time, Amy had insulted me in the worst way, and Larry was angry at me for it. I felt like he should be the one apologizing. For the next 3 weeks, Larry and I didn't talk. It was tough at first, but after a while, I got used to the silence. His family kept having their weekly dinners, and Larry would go alone while I stayed home. Honestly, I didn't mind being alone. One of those nights, my parents video called me. "Hey, honey," my dad said. "Hi, sweetie. How's it going?" my mom asked. "Hey, Dad." "Hey, Mom. Things aren't great," I admitted.
Why?
"What's wrong, sweetie? If you need help with anything, just let us know," Dad said. "I don't think it's something you guys can help with, but thanks," I said. "Where's Larry? Isn't he helping?" Mom asked. "That's the thing, he's part of the problem," I said, feeling frustrated. "Oh, sweetheart, can you tell us what's going on?" Mom asked. "Well, his parents are wealthy and very snobby," I explained. "Oh, I can't stand people like that," Dad said.
Exactly.
"They see me as a poor girl who will never be good enough for their fancy circles. They've gone out of their way to humiliate me every time I see them," I said.
What?
"That's awful," Mom said, sounding shocked. "Yeah, and the last time I was at their house, Larry's mom called me an orphan as an insult," I said. "That woman. How dare she call my precious child an orphan? I want to slap her," Mom said angrily. "Do they not know about us? And what about Larry? What has he been doing through all this?" "I didn't tell them about you, because I knew they'd treat me differently if they knew. I wanted them to like me for who I am, not for my family's money. As for Larry, he's been siding with them. He thinks I was rude when I stood up for myself," I said, feeling the pain all over again. "Honey, are you sure this is the man you want to be with?"
Dad asked gently.
"I love him a lot, but I don't want things to be this way. We haven't spoken for 3 weeks, and honestly, I'm okay with it," I said. "All right, sweetie. I'll connect you with one of my friends over there. Don't worry about us not being able to help. We're here for you," Dad said reassuringly. "I think we might be able to help you get a bit of sweet revenge," Mom said with a grin. "Huh? What do you mean?" I asked, confused. "Your dad and I are coming to visit next week. We originally planned to take you and Larry on a vacation, but now we'll just take you instead. More fun for us," she said. "Really? Oh my gosh, I'm so excited to finally see you both in person again," I exclaimed. It was the first time in a while that I felt truly happy. We kept talking for a while, and Dad started to tell me more about his plan to help me. He asked where Larry's family dinners were usually held. I told him that they alternated between their house and different restaurants. Conveniently, the week my parents were visiting, the dinner was scheduled to be at a restaurant. I needed to find out exactly where the dinner would be so I could let my parents know. Luckily, I had access to Larry's email on my phone, and if there was one thing I knew about Amy and Adam, it was that they loved emailing everyone every detail. It wasn't hard to get the location, and I passed it on to my parents. At the same time, Mom's lawyer friend contacted me, and we started the process of filing for divorce. When my parents arrived, they checked into a hotel, and I met them there. We had lunch together, and then they sent me off for a spa day, which they fully paid for because they thought I deserved some pampering. While I relaxed, they were getting ready to surprise my in-laws. My parents walked into the restaurant where Larry and his family were having their dinner. According to Dad, as they approached the table, Adam and Amy began to whisper when they recognized him. Mom later told me how the conversation went. "Hello," my dad said with a big smile. "Oh my gosh, Mr. Jeremy. What brings you here?" Amy said, clearly surprised. "Well, I happen to see some familiar faces, so I thought I'd drop by and maybe join you," Dad said casually. "Familiar faces? Who are you talking about, Mr. Jeremy?" Adam asked, confused. "Well, I see Larry here," Dad said, glancing at him. "Hello, sir. A pleasure to meet you. Your daughter has mentioned you a lot," Larry said, looking a bit nervous. "But speaking of my daughter, where is she?" Dad asked, raising an eyebrow. "Your daughter? I'm afraid there's been a mistake." "She's not here," Amy said, trying to keep her cool. "But she should be, right?" "I'm sorry, Mr. Jeremy, but we didn't even know you had a daughter," Adam said, sounding confused. "Of course I have a daughter," Dad said firmly. "And she's married to Larry."
What?
"I'm sorry, but I think you're mistaken," Amy said, looking confused. "Yes, Larry's wife is named Lily, and she was an orphan." "Yes, I know that," my dad said calmly. "That's why we adopted her." "Excuse me? You're her dad?" Adam asked, shocked. "Yes, I am. And from what I can see, Lily isn't here tonight. She's told me that there have been problems with her in-laws, and now I understand why." "The problem is clearly you," my dad said firmly. "No. The problem is that she kept this huge secret from us," Amy exclaimed. "If we had known, we would have treated her better." "She didn't want you to be nice to her just because of her background," my dad replied. "Oh, well," Amy said, clearly flustered. "Lily asked me to give something to Larry," my dad said, pulling out an envelope. He handed it to Larry, who opened it with shaking hands. It was the divorce papers. After that, my dad walked out of the restaurant without another word. It only took a few phone calls for things to start changing. My dad's contacts were powerful, and soon enough, many investors began pulling their money out of Adam's business. His company was quickly heading for disaster. It was strangely satisfying to watch their world crumble, the way they had looked down on me. Not long after, I started getting a flood of texts from Larry's family. Some were full of insults, calling me all kinds of nasty names. Others were begging me to talk to my dad and somehow undo what he had done. But it was too late for that. Thankfully, Larry didn't make a fuss about the divorce. He signed the papers without any trouble. It was over. After everything settled down, my parents and I went on a long vacation. It was exactly what I needed. I had the time of my life, relaxing and enjoying my parents' company. Slowly, I began to heal from everything that happened. Losing someone I thought was the love of my life was painful, but I learned something important. I had to stand up for myself, even when it was hard. I'm so grateful to my parents for everything they did for me. They showed me what real support and love look like, and I'm excited to see what new adventures life will bring. "Joyce, we need to talk," my husband Dylan said quietly. His voice sounded sad, but I could tell he was faking it. I looked up from my laptop. I had been working on the plans for our home renovation. Standing next to him was his mother, Evelyn. She held a tissue to her eyes, pretending to cry. My stomach sank. I had seen this act before. Evelyn was an expert at fake tears. "The doctor says I only have 7 months left to live," she said, her voice shaking. "I don't want to be alone when it happens." Then she dropped herself into our armchair, the same one she had complained about last week, saying it didn't match her living room style. She even measured it, like she was thinking of taking it home. Something felt off. "My name is Joyce Byers. I'm 35 years old, and 3 years ago, my life changed forever. My parents passed away in a car accident. With the inheritance they left me, I bought my dream home, a beautiful old Victorian house. It needed a lot of repairs, but it was mine. I finally had something that was just for me. From the beginning, Evelyn never liked the fact that I owned the house. She always made little comments. Now here she was, trying to move in. "Mom needs to live with us," Dylan said firmly. "We can turn your art studio into her bedroom." His words hit me hard. That studio meant everything to me. It was where I painted, where I felt peaceful. The room had large windows that let in soft, warm sunlight, the perfect place to create art. I had dreamed about having a space like that for years. "I know this is a surprise," Evelyn said, dabbing at her eyes again. but family stays together in hard times. Family? She had never treated me like family. I had been married to Dylan for 9 years, and in all that time, she had made me feel like I didn't belong. To her, I was the woman who had taken her precious son away. Which doctor told you this? I asked gently. Maybe we should get another opinion, just to be sure. Evelyn paused. Dr. Henry, she finally said. But I trust him. Dr. Henry? That name made my eyes narrow. Last year, just before Dylan and I were going to Belgium for vacation, Evelyn said the same doctor told her she had a rare disease. We canceled the whole trip to take care of her. And then, just 3 weeks later, she was totally fine. I looked at her, trying to stay calm. Was this another one of her tricks? I had already given up so much because of her lies. I need time to think, I said. And I meant it. Because this time, I wasn't going to be fooled so easily. I said I need time to think, I repeated calmly. Dylan didn't like that. He raised his voice. My mother is dying. Where is your compassion? I looked at him closely. For years, I had watched him take his mother's side over mine in every argument. No matter how small or big the issue, he always defended her. And now he was doing it again. Something inside me shifted. I understand this is hard, I said firmly, but I still need time to think. Evelyn, who had been standing quietly, suddenly smiled sweetly. Well, she said in a soft voice, since Dylan is your husband, the house belongs to him too. And it's a son's duty to take care of his mother. I raised my head and looked directly at her. Actually, the house is in my name only, I said clearly. I bought it with the inheritance my parents left me. Evelyn's fake smile faded. She wasn't expecting that response. But that's not the point, I continued. This is a serious decision. I won't be rushed. I walked out to the garden to clear my head. The garden was my favorite place. Quiet, peaceful, full of flowers I had planted with care. I sat on the wooden bench and pulled out my phone. I searched for Dr. Henry's office and called the number. Hi, I said politely to the receptionist. I'm checking on a patient, Evelyn Sharma. Do you have any record of her visit? I'm sorry, the woman replied. We don't have any patient with that name in our system. I thanked her and ended the call. I wasn't surprised. My gut had been telling me something was wrong. Later, I called my sister Megan. She's a nurse and has access to medical records. Can you check something for me? I asked her. 3 days later, Megan called back. Evelyn hasn't been to any cancer specialist, she told me. She hasn't even seen an oncologist. There's no diagnosis. She's lying. I felt both relieved and angry. For a whole week, I had watched Evelyn act like she was sick. She brought over moving boxes and talked about what color she wanted to paint the walls. Dylan treated me like I was heartless. He barely spoke to me and looked at me like I was the bad person for hesitating. Then came the big family dinner. Evelyn had invited everyone. Dylan's sisters, their husbands, aunts, uncles, and cousins. I knew what she was trying to do. She wanted to make me look bad in front of the whole family. She stood up during dinner and pretended to be emotional. She announced her fake diagnosis and said I had kindly agreed to let her move in. Everyone clapped and praised Dylan for being such a loving son. I stood up too. My hands didn't shake. I lifted my glass and said, I have something to say. Evelyn smiled, thinking I was about to agree. Instead, I opened a folder, looked her straight in the eyes, and said, I spoke to Dr. Henry's office. I also spoke with every other cancer doctor in the state, I said clearly, looking directly at Evelyn. Her face turned pale. The dining room went completely silent. The only sound was her fork dropping onto her plate. It clattered loudly in the quiet room. Her hands began to shake as she reached for her water glass. I don't understand, she said, her voice trembling. Dr. Henry doesn't share patient information. That's strange, I replied calmly, because Dr. Henry retired 4 years ago. His clinic has been closed ever since. Dylan stood up quickly. His chair made a loud noise as it scraped across the floor. Joyce, what are you doing? He asked, looking upset. I didn't raise my voice. I simply opened the folder I had brought with me and pulled out the papers I had carefully gathered. I contacted every cancer hospital and clinic within 200 miles, I said. Not a single one has a patient named Evelyn Sharma diagnosed with cancer. In fact, there's no record of her being tested at all. The room filled with whispers. People exchanged confused and shocked looks. Evelyn's sister, Madison, leaned forward and frowned. "Evelyn, is this true?" she asked gently. Evelyn suddenly stood up and shouted, "She's lying. Joyce is trying to turn all of you against me because she doesn't want me in that fancy house of hers." "Actually," I said as I slid the papers across the table, "I'm telling the truth. These are official hospital records. If anyone doubts me, you can call the hospitals yourselves and ask." Dylan picked up the papers with shaking hands. He stared at them, trying to make sense of what he was reading. "This can't be right," he muttered. "Mom wouldn't. She wouldn't lie like this." Jacqueline, his younger sister, spoke up from the end of the table. Her voice was quiet but steady. "Really?" she said. "Do you remember when she faked pneumonia before your wedding? Or that heart problem she claimed to have when you got the job offer in Sacramento?" Evelyn's face twisted with anger. "Jacqueline, how dare you talk to your mother like that?" "Yes, you're my mother," Jacqueline replied, "and I love you. But enough is enough. The lies, the fake illnesses, the drama, it's not okay anymore. It hurts everyone." Dylan slowly sat down, still holding the documents. I could see the truth sinking in. "You just wanted the house," he whispered, looking heartbroken. Evelyn finally lost control. "Of course I wanted the house," she shouted. "Why shouldn't I? She used her inheritance to buy that beautiful home, while I'm stuck living in a tiny old house. It's not fair." She looked around the room, but no one defended her. Because deep down, everyone finally saw her for who she really was. I kept my voice calm as I spoke again. "Was it fair when you tried to convince Dylan to fight my inheritance in court? Or when you told everyone at church that I was showing off my parents' death by buying this house?" The room went quiet. I could see the shock on everyone's faces. It was clear Evelyn had never told them those parts of the story. Dylan's head snapped up. His eyes were wide. "You did what?" he asked, stunned. "She needed to be put in her place," Evelyn said through clenched teeth. "She always walks around acting perfect, so independent. A real wife would have given that money to her husband." Madison, Evelyn's sister, narrowed her eyes. Her voice was sharp as she spoke. "Like you gave your inheritance to your husband? Oh wait, you didn't get one, did you?" That comment cut deep. Everyone in the room felt the shift.
The truth was out now.
The real reason behind all of this was jealousy. Evelyn had never accepted that I used my own money to build something beautiful. Evelyn's face began to crumble. But this time, it wasn't one of her fake crying episodes. This was real. Her lies, her plans, her years of bitterness, they were finally unraveling. "I just wanted," she started to say, then stopped. She looked around like she didn't know what to do anymore. "You wanted to control everything," Jacqueline said, finishing her sentence. "That's what this is all about. But this time, you crossed a line. Faking cancer, Mom, that's cruel. Not just to Joyce, but to anyone who's actually living with that pain." Dylan stood again. But he didn't look angry now, just tired. Like a weight had dropped on his shoulders. "I think everyone should go home," he said quietly. Then he turned to Evelyn. "Mom, I'll drive you." "But Dylan," Evelyn began. "No, Mom," he interrupted, firm this time. "Not this time." Everyone started leaving the table. One by one, they walked past Evelyn without making eye contact. She looked around the room, her eyes searching for support. But no one looked back at her. I stayed seated, my hands folded in my lap. I didn't say anything. I just stared at the table, still trying to process everything. Madison paused as she walked by me. She gently placed a hand on my shoulder. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "We should have seen it sooner." After the last guest left, the house felt still. I got up and started clearing the dinner plates, most of which hadn't even been touched. From outside, I heard the sound of Dylan's car engine starting, then driving away. I didn't know if he'd be coming back tonight. Honestly, I didn't know what would happen next. But as I stood in the kitchen of my house, I reminded myself of one thing. No matter what happened next, I still had my truth. And I still had my home. I felt something I didn't expect, relief. The truth was finally out. And with it, the heavy weight I'd carried for years was gone. All the fake smiles, the quiet insults, and Evelyn's constant control no longer sat on my shoulders. I walked over to the window that looked out into my garden. The sky was glowing with shades of pink and gold as the sun slowly set. It looked peaceful. Whatever happened next, I knew deep down I had done the right thing. My parents had always told me to stand up for what's right. Tonight I finally listened. Just then, I heard the front door open. I turned around and saw Dylan standing there. He looked tired, more than just physically. His face held something deeper, shame. "I dropped her off at home," he said quietly. His voice sounded rough, like he hadn't spoken in a while. "She cried the whole way there. She said I was choosing you over her." I didn't say anything at first. I just watched him as he slowly walked into the kitchen, taking it all in. He looked like a stranger in his own home. He gently ran his hand over the kitchen counter, the same one we had picked out together when we were fixing up the house. So many memories had been built here. "But that's not what this is about, is it?" he said, finally breaking the silence. "This is about choosing truth over lies. And I've been blind, Joyce. So blind." I leaned against the sink and crossed my arms. "Yes, you have," I said, not in anger, but in truth. He nodded. All those times she suddenly had health scares, always when something good was about to happen for us. "The tropical disease scare right before our anniversary trip," I added quietly. "The heart problems when you got the Sacramento job offer. And now, fake cancer." He looked down and shook his head. "She knew what she was doing." "She always has," I said softly. Dylan looked at me, then really looked at me. Maybe it was the first time he'd truly seen me in years. "How did you stay?" he asked, his voice filled with pain. "Knowing what she was doing, watching me fall for her lies every time?" "Because I loved you," I said simply. "But Dylan, I can't keep living like that. I won't do it anymore." He nodded and slowly sat down in one of the kitchen chairs, rubbing his hands together like he was trying to make sense of everything. "I don't expect you to," he said, his voice cracking. "What she did, faking cancer." He paused, trying to hold back tears. "My aunt died of cancer last year," he whispered. "How could she use that? How could my own mother use something so painful just to get what she wanted?" I didn't have an answer. But for the first time, we were both finally facing the truth. I moved to sit across from Dylan, feeling the heavy weight of everything we had just been through. The silence between us was full of emotion. "Your mother needs help, Dylan," I said gently. "Professional help. What she's doing isn't normal." He nodded slowly. "Jacqueline's already looking into family therapists," he replied. "She thinks Mom's behavior has gotten worse since Dad passed away. It's like she always has to be in control, always has to be the center of everything." We sat quietly for a while. The soft ticking of the kitchen clock was the only sound. Each second felt like it marked a new beginning, a moment of reflection. We both had so much to think about. Finally, Dylan reached across the table. He opened his hand, palm facing up. "I know I don't deserve your trust right now," he said quietly. "But I want to try. I want a chance to make this right. To be the kind of husband you deserve, not just the son my mother expects me to be." I looked at his hand, thinking about everything we had been through. Every time I had felt unheard, pushed aside, and alone in my own home. "It won't be easy," I said, my voice steady. "There have to be real boundaries this time. Clear ones." "I know," he agreed quickly. "No more sudden visits. No more guilt trips. No more letting her decide how we live our lives." He paused, then added, "And I think we should go to counseling. Together. I need to understand how I let things get this far, how I hurt you by always choosing her side." Tears filled my eyes, not because I was sad, but because for the first time in years, I felt seen. This was the man I had fallen in love with. The man I thought I had lost to his mother's control. "Okay," I said, placing my hand gently into his. "We can try." The next few months were not easy. Evelyn would swing between crying and saying sorry, then suddenly blaming me again. Some days, she called just to yell. Other days, she pretended everything was fine. But we stayed strong. Dylan started therapy, both with me and on his own. He began to see how deep his mother's influence had gone, and how much it had hurt our relationship. He worked hard to change, and I could see the difference. I also focused on myself. I finished setting up my art studio, finally turning it into the peaceful space I had always dreamed of. I filled it with bright light and big canvases. And sometimes while I painted, I thought back to that dinner.
The night it all changed.
The night I almost lost my dream home because of Evelyn's lies. But I didn't lose it. I held on. And now I was finally getting my peace back. When I look at how much our lives have changed, I feel calm and grateful.
There is peace now.
There is honesty between Dylan and me. Our connection feels stronger than it has in years, and I know deep in my heart, it was all worth it. It took time, but Evelyn eventually agreed to start counseling. It wasn't easy. She only went after Jacqueline and Madison sat her down and gave her a serious choice: get help or be left out. That moment finally made her realize she couldn't keep living the way she had. She's still learning. Slowly, step by step, she's trying to rebuild her relationships, not with lies or guilt, but with honesty. Last week, she even surprised me by sending a real card. A handwritten note, simple but sincere. In it, she apologized for everything she had put me through. It wasn't a big, dramatic moment, but it meant something. It was the first time I felt like she saw me, not as a threat but as part of the family. Dylan and I finally took that trip to Belgium, the one we had postponed so long ago. We visited beautiful cities, ate delicious food, and sent postcards to his mother from every place we went. Just simple updates, kind and thoughtful, with no hard feelings. When we returned, our home was exactly the way we left it. No surprise visits, no made-up emergencies, no emotional drama. Just peace. Just home. Yesterday, I was working in my garden when I noticed something special. A small rosebud had pushed through the soil, the first one of spring. It made me smile. That tiny flower felt like a symbol of everything we'd been through. Like our family, it was growing again, but this time in a healthy way. Slowly, naturally. Not perfect, but real. That's all I ever wanted. The house still stands just as it always has. Same walls, same rooms, same windows. But something about it feels different now. It's not just my escape anymore. It's not the place I go to hide from problems. It's our home, mine and Dylan's. A place built on trust, respect, and truth. A place where we can grow without fear, without lies, and without control. There may still be bumps along the way. Healing isn't always fast or easy. But I know one thing for sure: no amount of manipulation, guilt, or pressure can build what we now have. This home, this life, it's finally ours. And that's something no one can take away. I should have realized something was wrong the moment I walked into the house. The silence was strange, too quiet compared to the usual arguments between my husband, Vincent, and his son, Benny. My stomach churned as I moved toward the study, drawn by the faint sound of voices. It's the perfect solution. She'll never suspect a thing. Vincent's voice came through, low but filled with a chilling confidence. My heart raced as I leaned closer to the door, holding my breath. Then Benny spoke, his tone sharp and calculating. "Are you sure this poison will work slowly? I don't want her dying too fast before we can get access to her assets." I froze, my blood turning cold. My hand flew to my mouth to keep from gasping out loud. My mind spun, trying to make sense of the horrifying words I'd just heard. They were plotting against me, planning to take my life. The realization left me paralyzed with fear. Suddenly, the doorknob turned. I jumped back, struggling to steady my breath as Vincent stepped out. His eyes narrowed briefly when he saw me, but then his lips curled into a sickening smile. "There you are, dear," he said smoothly. Benny and I were just discussing some business matters. His words felt like poison themselves, so casual yet so deceptive. Benny followed behind him, his cold, calculating gaze sweeping over me, like a predator sizing up its prey. "Is everything all right?" Vincent asked, his tone laced with fake concern. He placed a clammy hand on my shoulder, sending a shiver down my spine. "You look a little pale." I swallowed hard, forcing myself to stay calm even though fear and anger raged inside me. My chest felt tight, and my mind screamed at me to run, but I managed to hold it together. "I'm fine," I lied, my voice strained. I forced a weak smile, trying to hide the chaos boiling within me. "Just feeling a bit lightheaded, that's all." Vincent's brow furrowed, pretending to care. "Why don't you sit down and have some water?" he said, guiding me toward the kitchen. "I'll make you something to eat." His words sent a fresh wave of dread through me. Was this part of their plan? Was he about to poison me now? The hairs on the back of my neck stood up as my mind raced with possibilities. Could they really go this far? For money, for greed? My own family? The thought was almost too much to bear. I watched in silence as Vincent moved around the counter, acting as if nothing was wrong. His casual attitude felt like a slap in the face. When I glanced at Benny, his eyes were locked on me, cold and calculating, like a predator watching its prey. That look sent a chill down my spine, but it also sparked something inside me, a fire. It burned strong and steady, a determination that I would not let them win. I wasn't going to be their victim. If they wanted a fight, they'd get one. I gripped the glass of water Vincent handed me, meeting his gaze head-on. My stare was a silent challenge, but he didn't seem to notice. His arrogance blinded him. "Drink up, sweetheart," he said with that same sickening smile. "You'll feel better in no time." I raised the glass to my lips, but my mind was racing. If they wanted a war, I'd give them one. I wouldn't rest until their twisted plan crumbled and justice was served. In the days that followed, I became a quiet observer, listening carefully for anything that might help me. Vincent and Benny acted as though everything was normal, but their calm only made me more determined. It was my best friend, Julia, who gave me my first glimpse of hope. One afternoon, over coffee, I finally told her what I had overheard. The words spilled out of me, anger, fear, and disbelief all mixed together. Her eyes widened in shock, but she stayed calm. "We need evidence, Gabrielle," she said firmly. "If we're going to stop them, we need to build a solid case." She was right. I couldn't confront them without proof. I needed a plan. That evening, I started going through our finances with fresh eyes. Slowly, the pieces of their betrayal came into focus: missing funds, shady transactions, hidden debts. Bit by bit, their web of lies began to unravel. At dinner one night, Vincent noticed my focus on the bank statements. "You seem pretty into those numbers," he said casually, though I could hear the edge in his voice. "Find anything interesting?" I met his gaze, careful not to show the anger boiling inside me. "Just doing some financial housekeeping," I replied evenly. His eyebrows lifted in mock surprise, but he shrugged and went back to eating, acting like he didn't care. His indifference only made me more determined. Over the next few weeks, I became an expert at hiding my true intentions. I pretended to be unwell, staying home to dig deeper into their schemes. Every suspicious transaction, every shady deal, they were all documented. Julia was my rock through it all, offering advice and keeping me focused. "We're getting closer," she said one evening as we reviewed the growing pile of evidence. "Soon, we'll have everything we need to take them down." Vincent's smug attitude only fueled my resolve. Did he really think I wouldn't fight back? His arrogance would be his downfall, and I'd make sure of it. If Vincent thought I was a weak, clueless woman who couldn't untangle his web of lies, he was dead wrong. But it was Benny who truly sent chills down my spine. His hatred wasn't subtle. It was cold, sharp, and impossible to ignore. His glares were filled with disgust, and his loathing burned in those lifeless eyes of his. "Better watch your back," he muttered one day as he brushed past me in the hallway, his tone dripping with malice. "Wouldn't want anything unfortunate to happen." The threat wasn't even subtle, just a reminder of the poison running through their veins. Their hatred was vile, dangerous, and growing by the day. But I wasn't about to let them intimidate me. I wasn't some fragile woman who would crumble under their pressure. No, I was stronger than that, reborn, even. Fueled by the need for justice, I was ready to fight back. With Julia's help, I was determined to expose the lies they had worked so hard to hide. I would dismantle everything they'd built, piece by piece, just as they had planned to destroy me. It was only a matter of time before their betrayal was revealed. And when that day came, I wouldn't face it with fear. I would be ready, with a cold, unshakable promise of revenge. Every day, I played my role with precision. I became the perfect picture of a frail, ailing wife, someone they wouldn't see as a threat. My act allowed me to stay unnoticed as I worked to bring them down. "You're looking extra pale this morning," Vincent said over breakfast one day. His voice had a fake concern, but underneath it, he didn't care. He barely even looked at me as he continued eating. I forced a small, weak smile and replied, "Just feeling a bit drained lately." He shrugged, brushing me off. "Well, get some rest. We've got the Benson event this weekend, and I can't have you embarrassing me in front of potential clients." His words were a slap in the face, filled with condescension. I clenched my teeth to keep from snapping back at him. Losing my temper wouldn't help my plans. I needed to stay calm, to play along. In the days that followed, I leaned even harder into my act. I moved slower, let my energy seem to fade, and kept up the appearance of someone too sick to be a threat. "You look like death warmed over," Benny sneered as I shuffled into the living room one afternoon. I sank onto the couch, letting out a tired sigh. "It must be that stomach virus going around," I replied, giving him a tired glare. Benny's face twisted with barely hidden disgust. He muttered something under his breath, something cruel, before storming out of the room. As soon as he was gone, I let my mask drop for a moment. My mind was working nonstop, plotting my next move. Their arrogance would be their downfall, and I was going to make sure of it. I let my act drop for just a moment, a grim smile tugging at my lips. If only Vincent and Benny knew the truth behind my frail appearance. Every cough, every tired sigh, was part of my plan to make them believe I was weak, harmless, and no threat to their schemes. As the weeks passed, I focused on protecting what was mine. With Julia's help, I started moving funds quietly and making arrangements through her trusted contacts. A new identity, complete with fresh documents and a spotless record, was being prepared. When the time came, I'd have a way out of this nightmare. "You've got to hang in there," Julia whispered during one of our secret meetings. Her eyes reflected a mix of worry and determination. "We're almost there." I nodded, my shoulders slumping as I kept up my frail act. "Don't worry about me," I said softly. "Just make sure everything is ready when the time comes." Her jaw tightened, and she gave me a firm nod before leaving. The weight of what we were planning hung heavily between us. At home, I noticed Vincent and Benny growing colder by the day. Their sneers and cruel comments had faded into silence, though their occasional snide glances said it all. Did they suspect I was up to something? Or were they simply waiting for the right moment to get rid of me and take what they thought was theirs? The thought fueled my anger, making me more determined than ever to bring them down. Finally, the night before the Benson event arrived. It marked the beginning of the next step in my plan. As I sat down at the dinner table, Vincent's gaze lingered on me, his expression a mix of annoyance and mock concern. "Well, you certainly don't look fit to attend tomorrow's event," he said, his tone dripping with disdain. "Maybe it's best you sit this one out, dear. We wouldn't want you keeling over in front of everyone." His lips curled into a smug smile, his amusement barely hidden. I looked away, pretending to give in, my face a mask of exhaustion. He probably thought I was defeated, worn down by his control. But inside I was calm, too calm. This was the quiet before the storm, the final moments before I destroyed his illusions of power. As a wave of nausea crept over me, I steadied myself. Tomorrow, everything would change, and they wouldn't see it coming. I pressed my trembling hands against the edge of the table, taking a deep breath to steady myself. They thought they had broken me, body and spirit, but they were wrong. By the time the sun rose, everything would change. Vincent and Benny would realize that their cruelty had done nothing but awaken a strength they couldn't imagine. With my act of weakness firmly in place, it was time to move to the next step of my plan. They thought I was powerless, but they were about to see how devastating their own arrogance could be. I started small, planting little clues to make it seem like Vincent was having an affair. A faint scent of unfamiliar cologne on his clothes, a smudge of red lipstick on his shirt collar, and whispered phone calls when he thought no one was watching. At first, they didn't notice, but I knew patience was key. Slowly, the seeds of doubt I had planted began to take root. It was Benny who finally snapped. One evening, his anger boiled over, and he confronted Vincent in a fit of rage. "Who is she?" Benny shouted, slamming his fist on the table so hard it made me jump. "Don't even try to deny it. I've seen the proof." Vincent's eyes widened, his face a mix of shock and confusion. "What the hell are you talking about, boy?" he barked. "The lipstick stains, the secret phone calls," Benny spat, his voice sharp with accusation. He leaned forward, glaring at his father with pure hatred. "You're cheating on us, aren't you? Some cheap fling." Vincent's jaw tightened, and for a brief moment, I thought I saw guilt flash in his eyes. But it vanished just as quickly, replaced by a mask of outrage. "How dare you accuse me of something like that?" Vincent roared, slamming both palms on the table, making the plates and cutlery rattle. "I've given you everything, a home, an education, a life of comfort, and this is how you repay me?" The two of them erupted into a shouting match, their words laced with anger and blame. It was chaos, a storm of accusations and denials. I sat back quietly, watching as the rift between them grew deeper. I had orchestrated this moment with care, and now it was unfolding just as I'd planned. Like a chemist carefully mixing volatile chemicals, I had set the stage for their destruction. And now, all I had to do was let the tension between them fester and spread. I had set the stage, carefully introducing the pieces of chaos, and then stepping back to watch it unfold. The explosion of distrust between Vincent and Benny had been inevitable. In the days that followed, the tension between them was suffocating. They could barely look at each other without exchanging sharp words, their conversations laced with thinly veiled accusations. "Where were you so late last night?" Benny snapped one morning over breakfast, glaring at his father with a fire that could burn through steel. "Out handling business," Vincent growled, slamming his coffee mug onto the table. The impact sent steaming coffee spilling over the edge. "Watch your mouth, boy. You have no idea what I've sacrificed for this family." Their arguments grew louder and uglier with each passing day. I stopped paying attention to the specifics, letting the growing animosity wash over me like music. I had composed this symphony of chaos, skillfully planting the seeds of distrust, and now I watched them destroy each other in a crescendo of anger. The results were even better than I had imagined. With their bond in tatters, it was time for the next step in my plan, a final act to push them over the edge. I waited, patient and silent, as the tension between them thickened. All I needed was the perfect moment, the right spark to ignite the fire that would consume them both. And when that moment came, I would be ready. The opportunity presented itself one evening at dinner. The air was heavy with resentment, the silence broken only by the clatter of cutlery and the occasional hostile glare or muttered insult exchanged between Vincent and Benny. Clearing my throat, I forced myself to look small and frail, twisting my hands nervously in my lap. Both of them turned to me, their faces filled with annoyance. "I'm afraid I have some troubling news," I said softly, letting my voice tremble. Vincent's eyes narrowed dangerously. "Out with it," he demanded, his tone sharp. "Don't waste our time." I took a shaky breath, feigning unease. "It's about," I hesitated, swallowing hard as though struggling to find the courage to speak. "It's about the other woman." The words landed like a bomb. The air crackled with anger and suspicion. Vincent shot to his feet, his face contorted in outrage. Benny leaned forward, his eyes gleaming with the triumph of vindication. "You lying, cheating bastard." Benny spat, his voice dripping with venom. The room erupted into chaos. Vincent roared, his fury shaking the very walls, while Benny launched into a tirade of accusations. The rage between them, so carefully stoked by my actions, finally reached its boiling point. I sat quietly in the storm I had created, knowing the final act was now underway. This was the moment I had been waiting for, and I would see it through to the bitter end. "I knew you had someone on the side," I said, my voice calm but cutting. With a single motion, I slid a crumpled photograph across the table. It was one I had carefully staged, making it appear as though Vincent was caught in a compromising situation. His brows furrowed in confusion as he grabbed it, but his face quickly twisted into pure rage. "This," he shouted, slamming the photo on the table so hard it shook. "This is a lie. A twisted, malicious lie." "Is it?" I asked quietly, my tone soft, almost hurt. "Because it would explain so much, your late nights, the secret phone calls, and that strange perfume I keep smelling." Benny shot to his feet, his fists clenched tightly, his face a mask of fury. "You smug, self-righteous bastard," he shouted, advancing toward his father. "You've been cheating this whole time, haven't you? Carrying on with some cheap fling while lying to us." It all happened in a blur. Vincent roared in anger and lunged at Benny. The two of them crashed to the floor, their fists flying and limbs flailing as they wrestled and cursed. The sound of their struggle echoed through the room, raw and savage. I stayed seated, watching the chaos unfold. Let them tear each other apart, I thought, letting the fire of hatred I had kindled consume them both. It seemed only fair. They had built their lives on deceit and cruelty, and now they would destroy themselves with the same venom they'd spewed at me. Vincent finally overpowered Benny, pinning him to the floor in a chokehold. His teeth were bared, his face twisted with primal fury, while Benny's face turned purple under the pressure. I watched, torn between revulsion and satisfaction. This was what I had planned. Every move, every step had led to this moment. When Benny's eyes bulged and his gasps became desperate, I finally moved. I fumbled for my phone and hit the record button. Let them finish their brutal fight, I thought. Let them reveal their true selves. I would document every second of their downfall. When the violence finally stopped, they lay sprawled on the floor, bruised and gasping for air. Their hatred had left the dining room in shambles, a war zone of broken furniture and shattered pride. They stared at each other with raw, unfiltered loathing, and for a moment, the gravity of what they had done seemed to hit them both. A dry, bitter laugh escaped my lips as I slipped the phone into my pocket. It was done. The scene had played out exactly as I had planned. "Well," I said, my voice steady despite the storm of emotions raging inside me, a storm fueled by years of pain and anger. "That was quite a performance. I'd say the two of you have given me plenty of reasons to rethink my will. Wouldn't you?" I said, my voice calm but sharp. Their eyes snapped to mine, and for the first time, I saw uncertainty flicker across their faces. Let them wonder, I thought with grim satisfaction. The game was in full swing now, and there would be no winners, only survivors. After their explosive fight, the house was heavy with silence, like a dark cloud hanging over everything. Vincent and Benny moved through the halls uneasily, avoiding each other. They were subdued, like predators licking their wounds. I stayed in the background, quiet but watchful, waiting for the right moment to strike again. With Julia's help, I had already set the next part of my plan in motion. The first step came in the form of a call from Dr. Austin, our family doctor. When I arrived at his office, I leaned heavily on Julia's arm, playing the part of a frail, sick woman barely holding herself together. Dr. Austin greeted me with a look of concern etched into his face. "I'm afraid the test results aren't good," he said, his tone grave. I widened my eyes, feigning shock. "What do you mean? What's wrong?" I asked, my voice trembling. He sighed and shook his head, his expression serious. "It seems your condition is more advanced than we initially thought." "I'm so sorry." The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Julia, ever the accomplice, leaned against me, pretending to be overwhelmed with grief. I bit my lip, keeping my face composed, though inside, I felt a spark of satisfaction. This was all part of the plan, a carefully crafted lie to push Vincent and Benny deeper into the trap. Dr. Austin, of course, had no idea he was a pawn in my game. His guilt and worry were genuine, and for a moment, I almost felt sorry for using him. Almost. But this wasn't the time for mercy. Not yet. When Vincent and Benny were called to the doctor's office under the pretense of hearing about my condition, their reactions were exactly what I expected. While Julia sniffled beside me, her performance flawless, the two of them sat stiffly, their faces cold and unreadable. There wasn't a trace of compassion or concern in their expressions.
Well,
Vincent said impatiently, glaring at Dr. Austin. What's the prognosis? Just get on with it. The doctor sighed, rubbing his temples as if the weight of the moment was too much. His weariness was genuine, but Vincent's tone didn't waver. No kindness, no hesitation, just raw, selfish indifference. It was almost laughable how easy they were making this for me. They had no idea what was coming next. I'm afraid the situation is quite serious, Dr. Austin said, his tone heavy with finality. The tests show that Gabrielle's condition is terminal and progressing much faster than we anticipated. The room fell into a thick, suffocating silence. I kept my gaze low, peering through half-closed lashes to gauge Vincent and Benny's reactions. To my disappointment, their faces remained as unreadable as stone. They sat stiffly, their expressions cold and blank, until I broke the silence. With deliberate calm, I let my voice cut through the tension. Given the circumstances, I said softly, my voice trembling just enough to sound genuine, I've decided to make changes to my will. Effective immediately. Vincent's head snapped toward me, his eyes narrowing like a predator's. Oh, he said, his voice sharp and dripping with false sweetness. And just what changes are you planning, dears? I let out a weak, rattling cough, doubling over for dramatic effect. When I straightened, pale and unsteady, I clung to Julia's arm for support. Vincent's jaw tightened, a slight twitch betraying the storm brewing beneath his calm facade. My entire estate, I said, my voice gaining strength as I locked eyes with them both, will be left to the Amnesty International Foundation after my death. The silence that followed was deafening. The air seemed to vanish from the room as the weight of my words sank in. I watched with quiet satisfaction as the blood drained from their faces, leaving them pale and stunned. For years, they had treated me like nothing more than a stepping stone to wealth, a convenient means to their selfish ends. Now, with their plans ripped out from under them, they sat frozen, disoriented and vulnerable. It was perfect. Their shock and confusion were the prelude to the grand finale I had been planning all along. Just a few more moves, and this sordid theater of lies and betrayal would reach its explosive climax. In the days that followed, the atmosphere in the house grew even darker. Resentment and desperation hung in the air like a thick, choking fog. Vincent and Benny skulked around like cornered animals, their movements jittery and erratic. They avoided each other as much as they avoided me, their paranoia growing with each passing day. From a safe distance, I watched their unraveling. Their greed, anger, and fear consumed them, eating away at whatever shred of composure they had left. They had no idea that their downfall was being orchestrated right in front of them. Every step they took brought them closer to the inevitable end, and I was ready to watch it all unfold. I had endured every wound they inflicted, and now I could see the effects written clearly on their faces. The smug confidence they once wore had crumbled into desperation and fear. At times, their emotions exploded into uncontrollable rage, shouting accusations and slamming furniture as if breaking things could somehow fix their unraveling plans. When the storms passed, they retreated to their corners, no doubt plotting new ways to regain control. "You deceitful witch," Vincent bellowed one morning, slamming his fist on the kitchen counter so hard that the plates rattled. "This is your revenge, isn't it? Finally showing your true colors." I stared at him blankly, my pale face giving nothing away. He stormed around the kitchen island, his steps heavy with frustration. Up close, the stench of whiskey and sweat clung to him, suffocating and sour. Without a word, I turned and shuffled out of the room, every movement slow and deliberate to maintain my appearance of frailty. Let him yell and rage. His anger couldn't touch me anymore. As my supposed condition worsened, Vincent and Benny's behavior became even more vile. They hurled objects and screamed obscenities with a venom that could have shaken anyone else. But through it all, Julia remained my anchor. Her steady presence and wise advice were a shield against the toxic storms swirling around me. "Stay the course," she whispered one evening as we sat in the guest room, listening to yet another argument erupt between Vincent and Benny on the other side of the door. "They're falling apart, Gabrielle. You can see it." She was right. Their desperation was etched in their faces and burned in their eyes. And as much as I hated what they'd done to me, I couldn't deny the twisted satisfaction I felt. For all their cold indifference and cruelty, they were nothing more than greedy scavengers. Now that the prize, my fortune, had slipped from their grasp, their true selves were on full display. It became clear they'd stop at nothing to get what they wanted. Shady associates began appearing at odd hours, their hushed conversations with Vincent and Benny filled with furtive glances in my direction. I couldn't always make out what they said, but the air of desperation in those exchanges was unmistakable. At the heart of their scheming, I saw something darker than greed. It wasn't just about money anymore. It was about power, the primal need to dominate, to reclaim control at any cost. Their growing desperation fueled their willingness to cross any line, no matter how depraved. On more than one occasion, I caught their glances lingering on me, their eyes filled with something both calculating and feral. But I stayed calm, knowing their unraveling would soon reach its breaking point. The pieces of my plan were falling into place, and their growing madness only ensured their downfall. When I came back from an outing with Julia, the signs of their desperation were unmistakable. My things had been rummaged through, drawers left open, documents scattered, and jewelry boxes left ajar. They had invaded every inch of my personal space, searching for something, anything, that might undo the terms of my will. Perhaps they thought they'd find a loophole, or maybe their madness had driven them to simply loot my belongings in frustration. Either way, I saw their actions for what they truly were, the final, desperate flailing of men who knew their fate was sealed. Every frantic move they made only tightened the noose around their necks, hastening the inevitable. Soon, there would be nothing left for them to grasp at, no more schemes, no more desperate acts to save themselves. And when that moment came, I would be waiting, ready to deliver the final blow to their delusions of entitlement. For now, I was content to watch and wait, knowing that karma had already set the wheels in motion. The best reckonings, I had learned, come not with haste, but with the slow and steady hand of fate. The day of reckoning arrived not with an explosion of drama, but with an almost ordinary calmness. One moment, Vincent and Benny were in front of me, hurling threats and obscenities like wild animals, their voices dripping with malice. The next, the door behind me swung open, and the room filled with the heavy presence of law enforcement officers. "Vincent Grayson." "Benyander Grayson," a gruff voice announced, cutting through the chaos like a blade. "You're both under arrest." For a second, the room fell silent. It was as though time itself had stopped. Then, chaos erupted once again. "This is ridiculous." Vincent's voice, usually so polished and controlled, cracked with disbelief. "On what grounds?"
Fraud.
"Extortion. Attempted murder," the lead officer replied sharply. He glanced at me, and a silent understanding passed between us. "I'm sure the list will grow as we process the evidence." The weight of the accusations seemed to crush them. Vincent and Benny shrank before my eyes, their bluster and arrogance evaporating. Gone were the swaggering bullies who had tormented me. They now looked like scared, cornered animals, reduced to nothing more than petulant children caught red-handed. "You," Benny hissed, his wild, feral eyes locking onto me. His face twisted in rage as he struggled against the officer restraining him. "This is your doing, you vindictive." The rest of his venomous insult was cut short as the officer yanked him back, a firm hand pressing against his chest. His voice dissolved into an angry growl as he was wrestled into submission. I stood motionless, my expression calm, as the scene unfolded before me. The once powerful men who had tried to destroy me were now powerless themselves, their lives unraveling in front of everyone. This wasn't the chaotic, fiery ending I had imagined, but in its quiet, methodical way, it was perfect. Their reckoning had come at last, and there was no escape. I stood quietly, unmoved, as Vincent and Benny were dragged out of my home, their limbs flailing as they resisted in vain. Their glares burned with pure hatred, trying to pierce through my calm exterior. But I felt nothing. No fear, no anger, no pity. Only a deep sense of closure, a release, as if the poison that had lingered in my life for so long was finally being expelled. They were gone, and with them went the dark shadow they had cast over my existence. When the chaos settled, Julia stepped out of the corner and placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. "It's over, Gabrielle," she said softly, giving me a reassuring squeeze. "You're free of them." I nodded, though her words barely registered. The weight of what had just happened began to settle over me, rushing in like a wave. It was done. The nightmare was over. Justice had been served in the most poetic way imaginable. Yet, as I stood there, I felt no overwhelming joy, no triumphant victory, just an emptiness, a void where their toxic presence had once been. The authorities moved through the house, carefully collecting and documenting the evidence I had spent months assembling. Every detail of Vincent and Benny's crimes was exposed: fraud, financial schemes, and, most damning of all, their twisted plan to poison me and steal everything I had worked for. With each revelation, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders, the heavy burdens I had carried for so long finally easing. When the investigators finished their work and left, the house felt strangely quiet, almost weightless. For the first time in what felt like forever, I felt a sense of peace, as if I had been set free from invisible chains. Later that evening, Dr. Austin arrived, his face etched with worry and uncertainty. The guilt in his eyes was unmistakable. He had realized he'd been a pawn in a much larger game. As he stepped inside, he struggled to find the right words. "I don't know what to say, Gabrielle," he began, his voice cracking. "When I found out the truth," I raised my hand, cutting him off with a simple gesture. "Think nothing of it, Julian," I said calmly. "You were just a means to an end." Relief and discomfort flickered across his face, but I had no interest in easing his guilt. He had played his role, and now it was over. The chapter was closed, the poison drained, and my life was finally mine again. "I'm sorry I had to involve you, but it was necessary," I said, my tone calm but firm. Dr. Austin swallowed hard, my words sinking in. I could see the tension slowly leaving his body as he processed the truth. "So, it's true?" he asked, his voice quiet but steady, a spark of understanding breaking through his earlier confusion. "This was all a plan? A way to expose them and their crimes?" A faint smile curved my lips as I stood, feeling a renewed sense of strength and purpose. "A woman has to protect herself, Julian. Surely you can understand that." With those parting words, I left the room, leaving behind the role I had played for so long. The fragile, deceived woman was gone. I had shed that skin, stepping into a new chapter of my life, one free of lies and full of endless possibilities. As I walked out onto my sunlit estate, I paused to take it all in. The air felt different, lighter, as though the weight of my past had finally been lifted. A new dawn was rising, and I was ready to embrace it with open arms. My life was mine again, unshackled from the chains of a history I should never have endured. And now, I was free to start over, stronger and more determined than ever. My fiancé slapped me because I refused to wear his mom's old dress for our wedding. Now that mama's boy can go ahead and marry his mother. I thought I had it all figured out at 24. I was engaged to a guy I'd been with for 6 years. He's 25, and I really thought we were in love. Looking back, it feels like a joke. It's hard to believe I missed all the signs, but that's what happens, right? We only see what we want, especially when we're holding on to the dream of a perfect love story. We got engaged in April 2024, and I was so excited, thinking of our perfect wedding. We set the date for next May, which was supposed to be romantic because it was the anniversary of when we first met. Now, I can't believe how naive I was. I spent so many nights lying awake, dreaming of our life together. In July 2024, we started planning the wedding. I was thrilled and chose a light blue and white theme, thinking it would be beautiful for spring. I spent hours on Pinterest, making mood boards and sharing ideas with my fiancé. I should have noticed something was wrong when he barely showed any interest, but I just told myself he was busy with work. I remember staying up late researching venues, caterers, and florists, putting all my energy into creating a perfect day. I'd send him links and ideas, and he'd reply with a quick, looks good, or just one-word texts. I thought he was just letting me have my dream wedding. Now, I know he simply didn't care. He was probably spending more time talking to his mom about each detail than actually planning with me. It's important to mention that my ex-fiancé, yes, ex-fiancé, is an only child. What I didn't realize was that I was signing up to marry a mama's boy who would always prioritize his mom's wishes over mine. He'd call her every day, sometimes more than once, and would check with her about everything, from the car he wanted to buy to what we should have for dinner. At first, I thought it was sweet how close he was with his mom, a sign that he cared about family. A couple of weeks ago, I went wedding dress shopping with my mom and sister. It was supposed to be a special day, a memory I'd hold on to forever. We went to several shops, trying on one dress after another. In the last store, I found the dress, a beautiful, elegant gown that made me feel like a princess. It only needed a few adjustments to fit perfectly. I was so happy. I remember standing in front of the mirror with tears in my eyes as my mom and sister admired how beautiful I looked. For a moment, everything felt perfect. I felt like the bride I had always dreamed of being. I was so excited that I sent photos of the dress to my fiancé, and he replied that it looked beautiful. I felt like I was on top of the world. But I should have known he'd rush to show those pictures to his mom, like a kid showing off a good grade. That's when everything went downhill. My future mother-in-law, or should I say, the woman who would have been my mother-in-law if her son wasn't so attached to her, saw the dress, and she completely lost it. She called me right away, but I was still out with my mom and sister, so I didn't answer. I figured I'd call her back later, thinking she might just be excited about the dress I'd chosen. When I got back home, I found her waiting for me. She had let herself in, probably using the spare key we'd given her for emergencies. She was sitting there like she owned the place. I walked in, still feeling happy about finding my dream dress, but that joy vanished the moment I saw her angry face. As soon as I walked through the door, she went off on me. She jumped up from the couch and started accusing me of lying. According to her, I had promised to wear her old wedding dress, a dress that was probably ancient and full of moth holes. But I never made any such promise. All I could think was, where's my fiancé? Why isn't he here standing up for me? I was totally caught off guard. This woman, who I thought liked me, and who I had tried so hard to please for 6 years, was now calling me a liar right to my face, in my own home. And all over a dress that I never agreed to wear. I tried to stay calm as I explained to her that I never made such a promise. I had never promised to wear her dress. But did she listen? Of course not. Instead, she started yelling, her voice getting louder and sharper with every word. She kept calling me a liar, saying I didn't deserve to marry her precious son, as if she was doing me a favor by letting me join their messed-up family. I was so shocked, I couldn't even respond. I just turned around and walked to my room like a child who had been scolded. Even with the door closed, I could still hear her shouting. After what felt like forever, I finally heard the front door slam. A few minutes later, my fiancé came into the room. He had the nerve to ask me what had happened, as if he hadn't heard his mom's yelling from wherever he'd been hiding. I looked at him, this man I thought I knew and loved, and felt nothing but disappointment and betrayal. I told him my side, still in shock from the attack I'd just gone through. And do you know what he did? Instead of comforting me, instead of standing up for me, he started explaining his mom's side. He said that, apparently, when we first started dating 6 years ago, his mom had shown me her wedding dress, and I had supposedly said I'd love to get married in it. Now, I have no memory of ever saying that. Sure, 6 years is a long time, and maybe I said something just to be polite when I first met her. But to promise I'd actually wear her dress? No way. Besides, have you seen the style from 35 plus years ago? That dress would look better in a museum than on a modern bride. But my fiancé was actually taking his mom's side, entertaining the idea that I had promised to wear it and was now breaking my word. I went to bed that night feeling completely alone, even with him sleeping next to me. I tossed and turned, replaying the day's events in my head, wondering how everything had gone so wrong. I thought about all the times I had put his family's needs before mine, all to keep the peace. And for what? To be treated like this? The next morning, I woke up to a flood of messages from my future mother-in-law. Each one was like a stab to the heart. She called me a liar again and again, saying I wasn't good enough for her son and that he shouldn't marry me. I couldn't help but tear up. I had tried so hard to be liked by this woman. I showed my fiancé the messages from his mom, hoping he'd see how cruel and hurtful she was being. But instead, he just said, "She's probably just hurt that you don't want to wear her dress." Just hurt? Seriously? She was attacking my character, trying to push him into calling off our engagement, and all he could say was that she was just hurt. I couldn't believe it. That's when it hit me. This wasn't about a dress anymore. It was about respect, standing up for myself, and having a partner who would support me no matter what. And suddenly I realized I didn't have any of that. I had spent 6 years with a man who would always put his mom's feelings above mine, who would never truly stand by me. I tried to explain that this was our wedding, not a chance for his mom to relive hers. I told him I wanted to feel beautiful and comfortable in my own dress on my wedding day. But he couldn't understand why I wouldn't just wear his mom's old, outdated dress. He kept saying it would mean so much to her, and, "Can't you do this one thing for her?" As if I hadn't already done 100 things for her throughout our relationship. The more we talked, or rather, the more I tried to talk and he brushed off my feelings, the more I realized how deep this problem went. I started looking back on our relationship, remembering all the times he had put his mom's opinion above mine, her needs before ours. How had I missed it? I suggested compromises. Maybe I could wear a piece of jewelry from his mom, or add some lace from her dress to my veil. But no, with them, it was all or nothing. Either I wore the entire dress, or I was an ungrateful liar who broke promises. My future mother-in-law kept calling and texting, guilting me and outright insulting me, and my fiancé did nothing to stop her. In fact, he seemed to agree with her more and more. I tried to stand my ground, reminding them that it was my wedding too, and that I should get a say in what I wore. But they wouldn't listen, acting like I was being unreasonable, like I was causing the problems. They made me feel like I was the crazy one for wanting to wear my own dress at my own wedding. Update 1. You wouldn't believe the circus my life has turned into after the disaster with my future mother-in-law, if I can even call her that anymore. I decided it was time to have a serious talk with my so-called fiancé. Let me tell you, it went about as well as you'd expect when talking to a mama's boy who can't let go of his mom. I had to wait until he finally gave me a moment because, apparently, his mom's feelings are more important than his future wife's. When I finally got to speak, I said what should be obvious, that I wanted to wear my own dress on my wedding day, like any other bride. Is that really too much to ask? But guess what he said? He had the nerve to tell me the wedding was also for our parents. I couldn't believe it. I thought I was marrying him, not his entire family. I didn't realize saying yes to him meant saying yes to him and his mom. I managed to stay calm, somehow, and explained that unless his mom was paying for the whole wedding, this was our wedding, not hers. But of course, common sense doesn't work on someone stuck in mama's boy mode. Then, because I clearly enjoy making my life harder, I reminded him that he originally said my dress was beautiful before his mom got in his head. And do you know what he admitted? He said he only told me that because he thought it's what I wanted to hear. He actually thought it was ugly. The level of manipulation in this family is mind-blowing. But I didn't even react. What's the point? It's obvious honesty isn't a strong point for them. Instead, I tried to be the bigger person and suggested wearing something else of his mom's as a compromise, because that's all I do in this relationship. Compromise, compromise, compromise. But oh no, that wasn't good enough. He said I should be grateful his mom even offered her dress, as if it were some great honor. Should I kiss her feet next? Maybe offer my firstborn too? At this point, I'll admit, I lost my cool. I asked him straight up if he was marrying me or his mother. A fair question, don't you think? If he wants to be so close to his mother, maybe we should just call off the wedding so he can go live his happily ever after with her. They'd probably make the perfect couple. Well, that really set him off. He started yelling, saying I was making a big deal out of nothing and that his mom's request wasn't a big deal. I couldn't handle it anymore. I stormed out and called my mom, the only sane person in this whole mess. I poured my heart out to her, telling her every single detail. At least someone was on my side. She was shocked, to say the least. She couldn't believe how my fiancé and his mother were acting, and it felt like such a relief to know I wasn't the crazy one here. When I went back downstairs, ready to continue this ridiculous argument, guess what? He was gone. The coward had run off to his mom's house, leaving me nothing but a text saying he'd stay there until I came to my senses. Well, here's the thing. I have come to my senses. I'm seriously rethinking this entire relationship. If marrying him means marrying his mother, then I want no part of it. I wanted a husband, not a package deal with a controlling mother-in-law as a bonus. Update 2. First, thank you to everyone who commented and showed support. It means so much to have people backing me in this nightmare. I talked to my mom again, and she only confirmed what I already knew. My fiancé is acting like a childish, spineless mama's boy. So yesterday, the queen bee herself, my future mother-in-law, called me and said we needed to talk. Foolishly, I agreed. I should have known better than to expect a reasonable conversation from her. It's like expecting a shark to go vegetarian. It's just not going to happen. She started off by accusing me of going back on a promise I never even made. She actually said she was hurt by my actions, like she was the one who'd been wronged in all this. Before I could even get a word in, she made this grand statement, saying she was willing to move past it if I wore her dress. How generous of her, right? Maybe I should build a shrine to her, or something to show my eternal gratitude for her forgiveness. But I shut that idea down right away. I told her, very clearly, that it was my day, and I would wear what I wanted. Then, because I apparently love putting myself through more stress, I offered to wear something else of hers as a compromise. But no, that wasn't good enough for Her Majesty. It was her dress or nothing. I'm honestly surprised she didn't demand that I legally change my last name to hers while she was at it. Maybe I should just let her walk down the aisle instead of me. I tried one last time to explain to her that I wasn't comfortable wearing her dress, that I never promised I would, and even suggested she might be confusing me with one of my fiancé's ex-girlfriends. Let's be real, she probably thinks we're all the same, just a bunch of nameless, future mothers of her grandkids. Well, that set her off. She lost it over the phone, calling me a liar, saying I was unworthy and, get this, a witch. Seriously, a witch. What is this, the 1500s? I had enough. I hung up on her and blocked her number. Good riddance, as they say. But oh, that wasn't the end of it. My spineless fiancé then texted me, saying it wasn't fair for me to yell at his precious mommy about the dress. According to him, I'm the one who's blew up. Never mind that his mother was the one throwing insults and acting like a complete lunatic. In his mind, his mom can do no wrong, and I'm just some evil woman trying to take him away from her. I told him to meet me at our house, so we could talk this out face to face. But guess what? He refused, saying he'd come tomorrow. So here I am, waiting for him to find the guts to actually talk to me in person. I called a few of my friends to get their thoughts, and they were just as shocked as I was at how quickly everything had fallen apart. As the night wore on, I found myself sitting in the dark, staring at my engagement ring. It no longer felt like a symbol of love and commitment. Instead, it felt like a chain tying me to a future I wasn't even sure I wanted anymore. I took it off and set it on the nightstand. For the first time, I let myself really consider that this engagement might not end in a wedding after all. Update 3. Well, the day of reckoning finally arrived. My fiancé actually showed up at our house, and I didn't waste a second. I laid into him about his childish behavior and let him know how hurt and angry I was at both him and his mom for trying to pressure me into wearing that hideous dress. He tried to interrupt, probably to defend himself, but I wasn't having it. I cut him off and told him straight up that this was about way more than a dress now. It was about him being willing to throw away our relationship over a piece of fabric.
Of course, he didn't like that.
He had the nerve to say he was only standing up for what was right, as if his mother's ridiculous demands were somehow the morally correct stance in all of this. I wanted to ask him if he left his brain at his mother's house along with his backbone, but I held back. Instead, I calmly pointed out that the wedding dress is a huge part of the wedding day. I told him there was no way I'd wear something I wasn't comfortable with. Then I reminded him that if we were really going to get married, and at this point that was a big if, he should be supporting me, not taking his mother's side over mine. That's when things got really heated. He looked furious, especially because I'd said if we get married instead of when. He started yelling, saying I was planning to cancel the whole wedding over a stupid dress and acting like it was all some kind of joke. Let me tell you, the only joke here was his behavior. I stood my ground and told him that this whole situation was making me question if I even wanted to marry him. And honestly, it was. Because if this is how he acts now, how is he going to behave when we're actually married? Right on cue, he tried to storm out again, his usual move whenever things get tough. But I wasn't letting him run away this time. I followed him, telling him we needed to talk this through, or I would end things right then and there. That's when it happened. He spun around and slapped me, like I was some child who had misbehaved, not the woman he was supposed to marry. I stood there, stunned, as he stormed out of the house and went running back to his mother. The sound of that slap echoed in my ears long after he was gone. I couldn't believe it had come to this. This was the man I thought I loved, the man I thought I knew, and he had just raised his hand to me, all over a dress, all because of his mother's feelings. In that moment, everything became crystal clear. This wasn't love. This wasn't a partnership. This was abuse, plain and simple. I called my sister right away, and she came over immediately. She helped me pack a bag, because there was no way I could stay in that house another night. That was it, no turning back. There's no way I'm marrying this abusive mama's boy. I texted him right after, telling him it was over. No discussion, no second chances. He'd shown his true colors, and they were uglier than his mother's old dress. Update 4. This morning, I took action. I went to the police station and filed for a restraining order. It'll go to court soon, and I have all the evidence I need. I took photos of the mark on my cheek from where he slapped me, and I have video footage of him coming to and leaving the house. Let's see him try to talk his way out of this one. Filing for the restraining order was both empowering and heartbreaking. As for the wedding, I've decided to turn lemons into lemonade. I'm using the venue to throw an early birthday party for myself. And instead of canceling the honeymoon trip, I'm taking my sister. At least I know she'll always have my back. I also took some advice and unblocked my ex and his mom, big mistake. His mom immediately bombarded my phone with nasty messages. I had to mute them both to keep my sanity. The bitterness in her words was shocking. She accused me of ruining her son's life, called me a gold digger, and told me I was never good enough for her precious boy. I sent one final text to my ex, officially ending things and telling him exactly what I thought of him. He responded with excuses, begging for forgiveness. But you don't get to slap me and then ask for a second chance. This is probably my last update for a while, but I want to thank everyone for your support and comments. It's helped me so much to know that I'm not the one in the wrong here. Final update. I've received so many messages asking what happened after I called off the wedding, so I thought I'd take a moment to answer the most common questions. Thank you again for all your support during this wild time. Question: how did your ex-fiancé react when you officially called things off? Honestly, it was a mess. At first, he didn't believe me. He kept saying I was overreacting and that we could work things out. When he finally understood I was serious, he went back and forth between begging me to reconsider and getting angry. He even tried to guilt-trip me by saying I was breaking his mother's heart. Even after everything, he was more worried about his mom's feelings than mine. The worst part was when he showed up at my apartment unannounced, crying and pleading with me to take him back. I had to threaten to call the police before he would leave. It was emotionally exhausting, but it only made me more certain I'd made the right choice. Question: did you get your money back from the vendors? This was a big headache, but I managed to recover most of it. The venue was actually very understanding when I explained what had happened. They let me transfer the deposit to a different event, so that worked out well. The caterer was a bit tougher, but we managed to agree on a partial refund. The biggest loss was the dress, though, since it had already been altered. The store wouldn't take it back, so I ended up donating it to a charity that provides wedding dresses to military brides. At least some good came out of it. Question: have you had any contact with your ex since the breakup? Very minimal, and only through lawyers. After he showed up at my apartment, I wanted a clear boundary. I'm just glad to have closed that chapter and to be moving forward with my life. I got a restraining order against him. At first, he tried to fight it, but in the end, he agreed to a mutual no-contact order. It's been such a relief not having to deal with him directly anymore. Question: have you heard from your ex's family? Unfortunately, yes. His mother has been on a full-blown smear campaign, telling anyone who will listen that I'm a selfish, ungrateful bride who broke her son's heart. She even tried reaching out to some of my family members on social media, hoping they'd convince me to change my mind. I ended up having to block her on everything. Surprisingly, his dad sent me a private message apologizing for everything and saying he understood my decision. That was unexpected but appreciated. Question: how did your family and friends react? My immediate family has been incredibly supportive. My mom and dad were furious when they found out about everything, especially the slap. They helped me move out of the apartment I'd shared with my ex and even offered to help with any legal fees if I needed them. As for my friends, it was a bit mixed. Most of them were supportive, but a few thought I was making a mistake. One friend even suggested I should have just worn the dress to keep the peace. Let's just say, we're not as close anymore. This whole experience really showed me who my true friends are. Question: what happened to the engagement ring? Oh, the ring, that was a whole drama on its own. At first, I tried to give it back to my ex, but he refused, saying it was a gift. I didn't feel right keeping it, so I decided to sell it and donated the money to a domestic violence shelter. It felt good to turn something painful into something positive. Question: did you really take your sister on the honeymoon trip? Yes, and it was the best decision I could have made. We went to Paris, which has always been my dream destination. It was supposed to be a romantic getaway, but it turned into an amazing sister trip. We did yoga, went hiking, lounged on the beach, and had some deep conversations about life and relationships. It was exactly what I needed to heal and move forward. Question: have you started dating again? Not yet, and I'm in no hurry. This experience taught me a lot about myself and what I want in a partner. I'm taking this time to focus on my own growth and happiness. I've started therapy to work through some of the emotional pain from the relationship, and it's been incredibly helpful. When I do start dating again, I'll be more aware of red flags and won't ignore my gut feelings. And you can bet I'll pay close attention to how any potential partner interacts with their family. Question: do you regret your decision? Not at all.